Are you ready to hear a story that will give you goosebumps? If you are, hit that like button to boost your courage, share to warn your friends, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any chilling tales from us. Now then, let the story begin. It was a forest ranger that had called it in. She'd been found at the edge of an isolated campsite in the well-known national forest. The campers, horrified, called 911 when they saw my sister emerge from the forest on all fours, caked in dirt and blood. She was so starved and deformed that the campers told 911 that an emaciated bear was tearing apart their cooler and fisting handfuls of raw meat. The forest ranger who found her was from the same small town as us of Grovefield, California, about 26 miles outside of Yosemite National Park. He recognized, under all that dirt and grime, the orange guest shirt from the story of the girl who went missing in his graduating class. That's when he called my parents. I wasn't with them when they got the call from the local hospital that the forest ranger had immediately transported my sister to. I was nearby at community business college. It had been my 21st birthday last night, and I'd woken up with a monstrous hangover. My bed was strewn with bottles of Everclear and Malibu, and a thin layer of a fine powder of something covered my nightstand. I immediately downed a Xanax, chasing it with a black cherry white claw. The only time I'd left my apartment all day was when DoorDash dropped off my McDonald's meal of shame and I had to meet them at my building's gate. "They found your sister." My mother was incoherent on the phone. I could barely hear her over her hysterical sobbing. "She's at Tuolumne General Hospital. You need to come immediately. We'll pay for an Uber." I felt my body go cold. "That's not possible," I whispered. "It's been 15 years since she disappeared. That's not her." "It's her!" She was hysterically crying. "They did a DNA test. It's her. She's alive." There was a reporter waiting outside the hospital as I pulled up. The forest ranger had let it slip to his girlfriend that distress call he answered was for Paula Richards, the girl that went missing in their high school class, and the news had gotten out. Grovefield was small, with a population of only 1,000 people, and it was a one-stoplight kind of town, with the police station on one end and the forest on the other. Everybody knew everybody. They were my school teachers, nurses, babysitters, the local candy shop owners. And as with any small town, they protected their own and kept everybody else out. Grovefield keeps its business close and its people even closer, as my grandfather used to say. So when my sister disappeared 15 years ago, Grovefield kept the news quiet. Only one lone reporter from the nearby town of Jamestown caught wind of what was happening and snuck into Grovefield for the story. This is what he reported. 15 years ago, almost to the day, Paula Richards disappeared without a trace during a hike with her parents and sister. She was beautiful, beloved, and a rising star in the high school track star with D2 universities competing to sign her. It was her spring break and she was on a week-long camping trip with her parents and younger sister in the nearby Yosemite National Park. Her parents were avid outdoorsmen, as they'd backpacked and camped all over the majority of U.S. national parks, and had instilled that same preparedness and love for the wilderness into 15-year-old Paula. On the day of her disappearance, it was a Monday morning and they were hiking to Glacier Point, using the Taft Point and the Fisher's Trail. The trail they'd chosen was mostly flat. It was a 2-mile-long hike through wildflower-filled meadows, before dipping through the occasional patch of thick woods and leading to the south rim of Yosemite Valley. Paula and her parents could handle it no problem, but Aimee, Paula's 6-year-old sister, kept wanting to turn back. In hindsight, this trail was probably too difficult for a 6-year-old, especially since, according to the police reports, her parents had reportedly claimed that Aimee slept poorly the night before, crying that she could hear something crawling outside her tent. According to the parents, about 20 minutes in, Aimee started sobbing hysterically, like full-on frenzied screams, dug her heels into the dirt and refused to step an inch further into the forest. At this point, Paula and her family were standing in a low, wildflower-filled valley, right at the edge of a patch of dense forest. That's when Paula volunteered to take her back. Her parents agreed. Paula clipped Aimee's leash to her own backpack and turned to walk back. Their campsite was less than a mile away. Her parents felt confident, assured that Paula, who had been thoroughly coached in wilderness survival and first aid, could handle that short walk back. Paula was last seen wearing a bright orange Guess long-sleeve t-shirt, something she'd deliberately worn since it was visible from miles away. 8 minutes later, they heard Paula scream. Gone. Vanished. With only her sobbing, incoherent, hysterical younger sister left to tell her parents what happened. As I pulled up to the entrance, the reporter spotted me, and he descended like flies to a dead body. "Mrs. Richards! Aimee Richards! Have you seen your sister yet? How is she? Is she talking? Can she tell us what happened?" His camera bulbs popped and flashed, blinding me, and I was momentarily disoriented. Suddenly, I felt a firm grip on my arm. "Move, you fucking asshole!" I was yanked unceremoniously from the Uber and away from the horrendous reporter. "You okay, hun? That goddamn guy have been out there all day hassling anybody going in or out." It was my dad's friend Ron, an EMT at this hospital. "Hiya, Ron. I'm okay." I shrugged. After all, it's not like this is my first time. He eyed me carefully. "Right, so I guess, is it really her?" I mustered a grin. "Apparently so, according to the DNA test my parents had done immediately. I think Tom, the family lawyer, is checking again, though." "How after 15 years?" He trailed off, noticing the look on my face. "Hey, are you sure you're doing okay?" I faked a lighthearted chuckle. "Thank you for caring, but don't worry about me. Doing my best to keep mental breakdowns to a minimum." "Speaking of which, where is she?" "Room 82, third floor." He hesitated. "Aimee?" "Yes?" "Please be careful." My face felt tight as I forced a grin. "Don't you worry, Ronnie." I pointed to the silver locket from my childhood around my neck. "I've got my lucky charm right here." Well, it certainly looked like her, but like a gaunt, emaciated, withered version of what I had always imagined my sister would look like. It hurt to look at her. Her blue eyes dulled, sunk low in their sockets. Her cheeks were painfully sunken too, giving her the overall look of a walking, breathing skeleton. Her skin was ashy and, from what I could see, covered in open sores. Her beautiful blonde ringlets from my memory were gone. Her hair was horribly thinned, with only a light fringe left on her crown. I pushed past my parents and through the crowd of nurses and specialists. My stomach twisted and churned from anxiety. Fuck, she was awake. "Hey, big sissy," I said slowly, using my old nickname for her. "Do you remember me? It's been a while." She didn't look like how I remembered. Instead of the bright, beautiful older sister, a broken shell had returned to us. She also smelled horrible, pungent, rangy, and ripe, like a dead body that's been left to rot in the sun. "I, brought you something." I pulled it from my pocket. It was a bag of Hershey's Kisses. "Remember how much you used to like these?" I fought back tears. She was staring up at me, unblinkingly. Every few seconds or so, her right eye would twitch. Without breaking eye contact, she slowly reached for it. My heart twisted. She was missing all the fingernails on her right hand. "Aimee Richards?" I whipped around. "Yes?" It was her doctor. "Could you please step outside for a moment?" He held a clipboard for me. "If you're going to be visiting, I need you to sign these forms." Visiting hours was written in bold on the first page. "What's this?" I asked. Dr. Jenkins pointed at Paula. "It's for her. Her visiting hours are going to be limited. After spending 15 years away from civilization, her natural immune system would be overwhelmed by even the most basic viral infection. Plus, we'll be starting treatment for her leukemia soon and—" "Wait, leukemia?" I gasped. "She has cancer?" Dr. Jenkins paused and glanced first to his colleagues. Dr. J was a family friend. He'd been both me and Paula's primary doctor for years, and my parents loved him. "Stage 1 or 2, he said in hushed tones. "We're not sure, but still very treatable. Although in her condition, recovery is going to be tough." I glanced over. Paula was still staring at me. I pulled out my pill bottle and popped another little white bar. "Doc, what happened to her?" I felt my heart tearing apart in two. "She looks like she's decaying." Dr. Jenkins watched me swallow the pill, but said nothing. He looked pensive, worried. "Aimee, she's severely malnourished. Whatever she was eating out there, it wasn't enough. She's severely dehydrated, too. We suspect she has severe anemia, but won't know for certain until more tests come back." "That's it? Just severe anemia?" "There's also evidence of a significant brain injury here, at the base of her skull." He pointed to the back of his head. "It's healed now, but at some point she sustained a deep, blunt force injury." He sighed. "We think that's why she didn't find her way out. The concussion she sustained would have scrambled her sense of direction. That, plus the terrible winters and the lack of nutrients, it affects more than just the body. It affects the mind, too. I glanced over at her. Paula was still watching me through the little glass window in her hospital room. The baby hairs on the back of my neck were tingling. "You saying she went crazy?" "What I'm saying is," he sighed again, "well, we can only imagine what happened to her out there." After a week in the hospital, my parents wanted her home. It was like they were afraid she'd disappear again. The doctors fought against it, of course, said her health was extremely fragile and needed constant, round-the-clock care. My parents, willing to compromise but unwilling to back down completely, hired a live-in nurse to keep track of Paula's treatment. Because Paula was still pretty bedridden, the nurse gave Paula a bell to ding when she needed assistance. Paula's room was right next to mine, and I could hear the bell ringing at all hours of the night. It was making me reconsider my decision to stay for the next couple months. Paula's room was exactly the same as it was 15 years ago. Pink walls covered in NSYNC posters, Bow Wow and Backstreet Boys, and a signed poster of her all-time hero, Michael Jordan. An enormous corkboard filled with ribbons and Polaroid pictures with her teammates was hung over her desk. Big white beanbags lay stacked in a corner, and there were piles of CDs scattered in a semicircle around them. My parents had preserved her room, like a butterfly in amber, so that everything was exactly how she left. It's like they were waiting for her to come home. It's why we never moved from our childhood home in Grovefield, too. Even when things became unbearable, when the small-town scrutiny became too much, my parents still refused to let go. It was incredibly eerie. About a week after my parents took my sister home from the hospital, I was coming home from the local library when I walked in to see police in my living room. When my sister disappeared, her story rocked our town. She was a beloved, brilliant, and talented teenager who babysat for all the new mothers and helped organize church picnics and book clubs. And she had gone missing in broad daylight. The sole witness, and absolute last person to see her alive, was her hysterical, inconsolable younger sister, who, unfortunately, couldn't remember a thing. The police suspected my dad at first. They hauled him in, despite the fact he had a solid alibi and was clearly beside himself over her disappearance. The town branded him a killer, that he was running a sex slave ring in the wilderness and was feeding the girls to a cannibal cult. The police eventually had to release a statement admitting their fault in suspecting him, but the rumors continued to spread. After all, the truth isn't what people care about. What did the cops want? My mom had her head buried in her arms, and my dad was pacing around the kitchen. "They want to know what we know," my father said, sitting down at the table. "And if we had any more information." "What did you tell them?" I asked pensively. That she's back home. That she somehow got confused and lost out there, and then survived 15 years on her own despite all our efforts to find her, only to make it back to the same place she originally disappeared from, and that the young forest ranger recognized her from high school. But he shook his head. "Fuck. I think we should do an interview. We say our piece. We give them a headline, and then the town will calm down." He looked haggard. "We can't let it escalate like last time. We have to control the narrative, set the record straight." I snorted. "Dad, it's been 15 years. I'm pretty sure there's no record anymore." "Plus," I continued, my voice breaking, "what's the story going to be about? That we brought this stranger home? She barely eats. She doesn't sleep," I said, sick to my stomach. "I haven't seen her sleep once, and she doesn't even speak to us. Not one word." My mother's sobs punctured the tension like gunshots. Don't call her a stranger." She hiccuped loudly and took another swig from the bottle she was holding. "We have been given a second chance from God to be whole again. The last 15 years. Snot and tears streaked across her flushed face. "Our angel has come back to us. We are fixing our broken family. If only she hadn't..." A painfully familiar, overwhelming sense of frustration suddenly boiled hot in my stomach. "If only what, Mother?" I bitterly said. "If only I hadn't made her turn back with me." I watched as she desperately avoided eye contact. "Is that what you were going to say?" She opened her mouth to retort, but the damage was done. I knocked the whiskey bottle that had become a permanent fixture in her hands for the last 15 years and stormed upstairs. Suddenly, I heard a gentle knock at my door. It had been a few hours since I'd stormed upstairs, and I half expected my dad to storm up after me. but nothing. "Go away," I moaned. I heard shuffling outside, like someone was dragging their feet. My ears perked up, and I felt my skin start to crawl. Hello? Who is it?" For a second, I thought it was Amelia, the nurse we'd hired. But no, she actually had the night off tonight. Again, another gentle knock. "Hello?" I said again, this time louder, wrying. My heart leapt into my throat. Without further ado, I jumped up off the bed, strode over to my door, and whipped it open. Nothing. I looked down. Suddenly, a wave of bile threatened to rise from my stomach. In the carpet right outside my door lay a small, crushed wildflower. I knew what everyone thought. That it was my fault my sister disappeared. That I was hiding something because I couldn't tell the cops what I'd seen. That I was lying when I said I didn't know what happened. But the truth is, it wasn't that I couldn't tell the cops. It was that I had already tried, and they didn't believe me. When my parents heard Paula's scream, they came sprinting back, but it was already too late. Paula was gone, and I was curled up in the hollow of a tree with the yellow backpack leash wrapped around my throat. The leash was blood-stained and torn, and caught deep in the threads of the nylon were 5 fresh fingernails, torn at the root. DNA testing later determined that they were Paula's fingernails. I don't remember much from that day, but when my parents would reluctantly recount the story for me, they would say I kept saying one thing over and over. "It was a deer monster, Mama. A deer monster took Paula." My parents took me to therapy about a month after her disappearance. My mother didn't believe in therapy, saying it was against God and the church, but seeing how depressed and withdrawn I'd gotten, she agreed to give it a chance. My mother refused to let me see anybody local. She afraid of what I'd say and what would spread around town. SP, the police, had to bring in someone from 3 towns away. Our session lasted only 15 minutes, and my mother never took me back again. I had been sitting there, drawing, when the therapist walked in. The police and my parents were watching through the 2-way mirror. I only remember that the room was cold and white, and that the crayons had been the brightest thing in that room. They told me to draw what I saw that day, and I did. There was a small stick figure for me, a big stick figure for Paula, and something else, too. A towering figure with deep red eyes and horns that stood so close to Paula they were practically touching. In fact, I'd drawn them holding hands. It took up almost the entire page. "Hi, Aimee," the therapist said, her bright tone trying to hide the level of concern that was bleeding through. "What is this?" "The devil took Paula," I said simply. "That's what I saw." My mother, beside herself, pulled me from therapy. I was given a prescription for duloxetine and Xanax instead. I was only 6 years old, so of course I had a hard time adjusting to the medication. Maybe that's why I was awake that particular night. It was a couple days after the fateful therapy session, and I found myself suddenly wide awake at 3 in the morning. There was a full moon. I looked outside. There was a girl standing at our back fence. It was dark, but in the light of the full moon, I could see her bright orange, long-sleeved Guess shirt. It was as if she felt me looking at her. Her head snapped towards me, moving at a shockingly fast speed. She waved. I stood there, frozen, unable to wave back. She waved again. Then, slowly, she pointed to the fence. It was as if she wanted me to come unlock. I didn't move. I shook my head again, harder. I remember her watching me for a minute, for 5 minutes, then for what felt like an hour. Then slowly, she turned around and walked away. Her head rolled loosely on her neck, flopping around as if it couldn't stay upright. It had been almost 6 hours since I stormed upstairs, but I hadn't yet left my room. I thought about it, considered running for the door. I thought about texting my only friend, my dealer, and telling him to pick me up. But every time I chickened out, rising, shuffle, later. I'd run later. But right now, I could hear her pacing right outside my door. I told myself I had to wait till dark to run, then I'd make a break for it. In the back of my closet was an old motion-activated trail camera that my parents and I used to use while hunting. Also back there was an enormous flashlight and an emergency collapsible ladder. Perks of having parents that were practically doomsday preppers. It's been almost 10 hours since I'd stormed upstairs after the conversation I'd had with my parents. We'd both said some cruel and hurtful things to each other, and I'd half expected them to storm up after me. I wouldn't have wanted to talk, but I would have appreciated the olive branch, the fucking gesture. But no, they had left about 2 hours ago, around 10 o'clock. Their white Escalade roared as it started up, and I listened as it slowly faded away to nothing. It's midnight now and they haven't come back yet. Ding, ding, ding. Shit, Arjun, I mumbled. Fuck, the chimes sounded loud in the tomb-like silence of my room. I quickly silenced my phone as my heart stopped, and I held my breath, and I watched as the shadows paused underneath my door. Wrying. Shuffle. She was still out there. My hands were shaking and I forced them to be still as I delicately propped the camera against a stack of books. I adjusted it slightly. There. If anything happened, if anything came through that door, it would go straight to my phone. I saw my phone light up again, this time silently. It was Arjun, my friend. Arjun was a childhood friend of mine and lived in his parents' rental property about 15 minutes from my parents' house. We'd grown up together. We did everything together. We'd even lived on the same street since kindergarten. He was the Thelma to my Louise, the peanut butter to my jelly, even after every pill. So he didn't question why I needed a ride, and he didn't question why I needed him to park in the alley behind my house. I hoisted the emergency fire ladder up and threw it over the windowsill. It clattered loudly to the ground, and I winced as it almost hit the windshield of Arjun's beloved dark red Pontiac. The cool, crisp October air rushed in, and my fingers froze as I braced myself against the frame of my window. My stomach dropped as I looked down. But before I could take a step further, suddenly I heard a noise behind me.
My blood ran cold. I'd recognize that fucking sound anywhere. The camera. I whipped my head around, the giant blue duffel bag blocking my view. I strained to see around it, twisting my neck to look past it. It blocked my view, but I could still see as Paula, or whatever it was, slowly started to slide their hand underneath my bedroom door. Hand on Bible. I've never moved so fast before in my life. Paula's hand was sliding under the door.
I was standing in front of my bedroom door, and I could see myself in the full-length mirror that was attached to the back. My skin was pale, drained of any color. My brown, curly hair was wild, and my dark green eyes were wide and scared. I was trying to move, but my legs felt like they were glued to the carpet. I tried to move. I could see Paula's fingers inching closer, closer to me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. Help me, I wanted to scream. Help me, help me, help. Aimee, Aimee. Huh? I snapped back to reality. Arjun was standing in the doorway of his kitchen, a coffee in hand and his pug Milo, strapped to his chest in a Baby Bjorn carrier. Sorry, rough night. Yeah, I figured. He bustled into the kitchen. His blue robe flapped as he pulled out the toaster and slammed it on the counter. His black hair was slicked back. His tan skin looked moisturized, and he looked surprisingly coiffed for it being 7:30 in the morning. So, want to tell me what the fuck is going on? I swallowed uneasily. I tucked away the small black book I was scribbling in. What do you mean? He threw me an intensely condescending look. Milo, the pug, had the audacity to copy it. How long have we been friends? 17 years? And you don't think I can't read you like an open book? You're welcome to stay, but I need more information. For example, I didn't know you were back. Why aren't you at your apartment? What's happening with college? He brought over a plate of toast, setting it just out of reach. You get toast after you talk. Something inside me broke. Everything I'd been holding back from last night, hell, from this last month, came rushing out of me like a flood. My head fell to my hands, and sobs violently shook my entire body. Monroe, Arjun's gorgeous pitch-black husky, came trotting over and put her head on my knee. She whimpered softly. Whoa, Aimee, Paula came back. Arjun's face froze. You're joking. Is this a sick joke? His face was like stone. Paula? The older sister who disappeared when we were 6? My face was beet red, and a mess of snot streams and wet tears. Our ranger found her at a campsite in Yosemite. She was at the hospital for about a week before my parents took her home. I think my parents and the cops are keeping it quiet because nobody knows. She's been at my house, with me. I hiccuped. But things... Fuck, Arjun? Sobs ripped apart my chest. I tried to steady myself, placing both palms on the cool kitchen table. Fuck, things have been weird since she got back. Arjun went extremely still. He was looking at me oddly too, like he knew something I didn't. Weird. How? I can't explain. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Please just watch this. The timestamp on the video read 3:01 a.m. The screen flickers once, then twice, then finally settles. It's pitch black, and it's hard to figure out what we're looking at, but I knew. It's the feed from the trail camera I left behind on my bedroom floor. "Aimee, okay, I'm confused, Arjun said, exasperated. "What are we watching?" "Shh," I said softly. "Just watch." 3:02 a.m. Movement. The door is shaking, violently. For at least 30 seconds, the door is practically rattling off its hinges. Fortunately, there's no sound in the video. Then suddenly it stops. Nothing. No movement. The camera flicks off. A half second later, the camera flicks back on. There's something trying to slide underneath the door. It's so dark, so it's difficult to see what it is, but then the camera focuses. It's a hand. Paula's trying to slide her hand back underneath the door. Paula's crouching on the ground, trying to slide her hand under. Her hand is facing down, and it stops hard at her wrist. She can't get any further in. But then it doesn't stop. Her hands stretches into my room. Her wrist is almost a foot long now, stretched unnaturally thin. Her fingers, bent like spiders, are pulling themselves along the baseboards, as if searching for something. She starts stretching upwards. Her hand stretches out of frame, but I know what she's reaching for. The door suddenly swings open, and her emaciated, unnaturally thin arm retracts like a tongue back into the snake's mouth. Nothing. 30 seconds pass. The hallway is as dark as my room. Then suddenly there she is. She's crouched down, walking on all fours. Her arms and legs are bent unnaturally, pushing her belly against the floor. She's moving slowly, as if in pain. I can't figure out why, until the camera focuses on her closer. She's creeping in on her fingertips. Suddenly, she notices the camera. Her eyes, glowing white, focus on the red recording light. She reaches out. The camera falls, and the screen goes black. The silence was suffocating. I was watching Arjun's face, but it was unreadable. Like stone. Worse than stone. Like a dam, its concrete face holding back a torrent of emotion. Finally, he spoke. "What in the everlasting fuck was that, Aimee?" I held back a sob. "I left a trail camera in my room before I left with you. It's activated by motion. I wanted to see if Paula, well, whatever that is, if she would..." Arjun held up his hand. I could see his fingers, they were trembling. "You're telling me?" He pointed to the black iPhone screen. "That's Paula?" I hesitated for a moment, trying to read his face. He thinks I'm crazy, I thought to myself. He's seen me at my worst, coming off a blackout, lying in my puke in a bathtub. He doesn't believe me, but I steadied myself. "Yes, Arjun," I said softly. "That's Paula." His face was completely blank. He'd always been unreadable like that, even when we were kids. Out of our little group of friends, Arjun had always had the best poker face. But we always joked that. When his face got blank, it meant he was figuring out something. That he knew something we didn't. "So," Arjun finally said softly, "there's something I need to show you, in the basement." Arjun lived in one half of a duplex at the edge of town. He had 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms all to himself, and it was great. It was actually owned by his parents, who, for years, used to do long-term rentals with tourists who wanted to stay close to Yosemite National Park for the summer. But they stopped when Arjun started high school, and he moved in instead. He'd lived here on and off since then, even deciding to stay after graduation, and instead chose to commute to his classes at the nearby Columbia College. We used to throw some righteous parties here. Down here, we walked down the staircase to the basement. There were pictures of us lining the walls, me, Arjun, Mikey, Louise. My heart twanged uncomfortably. Next to Louise was her best friend from softball, Patrice, and next to Patrice was Jack. I looked down. It was still hard looking at him, even these few years later. There were so many pictures of us. There we were playing Little League T, playing Red Rover in the park, building our treehouse in the forbidden part of the forest behind Louise's house, getting milkshakes at Lucky D's diner. There was me in my emo phase with a face full of smeared makeup and head full of ratty hair extensions. And there was Louise winning medal after medal in softball. I frowned. These were from high school. Where was I? Oh yes, I was high. "Hey Aimee, focus." "You zoned out again," I snapped back. The door to the basement was padlocked. Arjun looked deadly serious. "There's something I need to tell you," he whispered. "But you have to promise me that you won't tell a soul what I'm about to show you." My body felt cold. "Of course, I promise," I whispered. "I promise. On Paula." He watched me for a second, his dark eyes searching mine, then nodded. With a soft clank, the padlock opened and he flipped on the lights. First thing I noticed was an enormous corkboard filling almost the entire back wall. It was filled with photographs, newspaper clippings, and large slips of paper with dates on them. 1962, 1977, 1992. Then, 2007, read the slips of paper, and below was crammed with newspaper clippings and printouts from the internet. Alien spaceship takes another. Finally, evidence of Bigfoot? Jamestown halfway house reports another missing, the clippings screamed at me. Large photographs of men, women, and kids were also stuffed into the crowded space. They looked like pictures pulled from yearbooks, mugshots, and random Facebook pages. Bits of red yarn were strung between the photographs and dates. And there, right in the center of the board, were 10 large photographs. They were labeled with a large, blocky handwriting. Missy Pulte, Dana Teppin, Mary Sanders, Kristen Poltansky, Daphne Tiths. I trailed off. Paula Richards. "Arjun," I breathed, turning to him. "You're looking for the missing girls." "Not missing," he said grimly, his bright smile gone. Gone. Dead. I felt sick. Arjun pointed at the board. In 2007, 10 girls went missing in Grovefield over the course of the last week in October. At first, there was nothing. No outrage, no police response, no, nothing. Grovefield, or Gravefield, I should say, covered it up. The longer Arjun talked, the more murderous he looked. I looked into it. The 5 girls that disappeared first. Kristen Poltansky, for example. He pointed to a mugshot of a small, smarmy girl with dishwater blonde hair. Burnouts. Kristen especially, constantly in and out of rehab. She was 15 years old and a drug addict, living on the street. Still, to this day, the police haven't filed a missing persons report for her. I frowned. "So what makes you think she's missing? Maybe she's just run away." But he was shaking his head. "I talked to what's left of Kristen's family. They haven't spoken to her in years." He looked over at me. The bare light bulbs above threw his face in sharp relief. 15 years, to be exact. I was trying to wrap my head around it. The faces in the photographs staring down at me, the overwhelming amount of internet printouts of conspiracy theories, and reports of missing persons reported from inside Yosemite National Park. It was starting to make my head swim. Finally, I had to ask. "So I know the story. I know the conspiracy theories, the rumors about that week." I tried to swallow, but my throat felt sticky. "But how does Paula fit into this?" Her name left a bitter taste in my mouth. And fuck Daphne, Louise's sister. Daphne wasn't a burnout, and neither was Paula. Arjun didn't even notice my discomfort. He was too wrapped up into what he was looking at. Kristen, Missy, Dana, Mary, and Allie Dandel all disappeared on the same day, the Monday of the last week in October. He paused. It was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Milo suddenly sneezed, scaring us. Then on Wednesday, Daphne and 3 of her best friends disappeared. They were having a sleepover at Daphne's house. The next morning, gone. Vanished in the middle of the night. He turned to me. I could feel him looking at me. Then Paula disappeared. She was last. On that Friday of the last week of October. My heart was thudding uncomfortably. I felt hot and dizzy, and I could feel tears beginning to burn in the corners of my eyes. Angrily, I wiped them away. I couldn't look at the board anymore. I looked away. There were big filing cabinets next to the corkboard with enormous binders stacked on top. 1962-2007 was written in big, bold black letters on the binder at the very top. I felt sick. Who do you think you are, not telling me about this sooner? My stomach, coated with thick layers of grime and bile from the past 15 years, felt ready to explode. Why the fuck didn't you tell me about this earlier? Arjun seemed taken aback by the violence in my words. Aimee, His face twisted. I'm sorry, I didn't. This is my sister you're investigating. My voice cracked. I jabbed my finger hard into his shoulder. My life. And you didn't think to tell me about this? I shoved my fist into the pockets of my sweatpants. I was afraid that if I didn't, I would use those fists on him instead. You're just like everyone else who gawked and laughed and looked at my life like some morbid roadside attraction. Who the fuck do you think you are? I could feel myself shaking like a leaf. and I turned to go, but Arjun blocked the door. "This wasn't my intention, Aimee. I love you. You know that." He grabbed my shoulders. I couldn't move. Arjun was a big dude. He'd towered over all the other kids, even the ones on his basketball team. "Ever since this tragedy occurred to you and to Louise, I never stopped thinking about it. Not once. Never stopped wondering about it. And it wasn't until last year, when all my courses were moved online, did I even have the time to start looking into it. And now with this," he gestured to my phone, "I think I finally have proof that there's something going on." His eyes burned deep into mine. "We have proof." I pulled away and wiped my eyes. "Have you mentioned this to—" But Arjun didn't even let me finish. He scoffed loudly, the noise scaring Milo. "Mention it? Do you remember the police's reaction to your dad? And to everyone else that tried to look into it?" He had Monroe's right ear between his thumb and forefinger and was absent-mindedly rubbing it. A nervous habit back from when we were kids. No way. I even tried talking about this with Louise once, and she shut me down. Hard. She kept insisting that Daphne was alive, wouldn't hear another word otherwise, kicked me out of her house. "Wait, she said what?" I blurted out accusingly. "What else did she say?" "She said," Arjun started, then glanced at me sideways. "Damn, you guys still don't talk, do you?" "What did she say, Arjun?" "That Daphne is alive." He smacked his lips hard on the last word. "Because according to Louise, Daphne has been sending her letters for the past 6 years. I felt my heart freeze, and for the first time since Paula came back, I felt the tiniest flutter of hope. "Holy crap, Arjun. We need to see those letters." "Yeah, no kidding, but I doubt she'll let us—" But Arjun suddenly froze. He was silent for a moment, then held up a finger. "Do you hear that?" I held my breath. It was silent. The HVAC suddenly kicked on and started humming loudly. "Hear what?" "Shh," Arjun whispered, listening intently. Thud, thud. My heart was beginning to pound. He looked at me, his dark eyes wide. "Aimee?" he asked slowly. "Does anyone know you're here?" "No, I didn't tell any—" Then suddenly I heard it. The crunching of tires on gravel. Arjun looked at me. The basement was suddenly suffocating. "We need to go. Now!" He grabbed Monroe's collar and rushed for the door. He threw it open and bolted up the stairs. Adrenaline coursing through my veins, I took one last look at the corkboard. Paula's face stared down at me, her eyes burning through the photographs. "I'm so sorry, Paula. Please forgive me." In my desperation, I grabbed the 2 binders at the very top of the filing cabinets. They were excruciatingly heavy. "Aimee, let's go!" I rushed upstairs. Arjun was standing at the top of the staircase, peeking around the hallway. He was looking at something. He had 2 large duffel bags with him, my dark blue one that I hadn't even unpacked, and a bright green one. Monroe was clipped into her harness, and Milo was still strapped into the baby Bjorn. Monroe was barking furiously at the front door. Her thick black hair stood on end. I gasped. There were 4 enormous black SUVs racing up the gravel road to Arjun's duplex. Dirt and dust were kicked up, ballooning into an enormous cloud that was racing straight towards us. "Arjun," I whispered. "We need to leave. We need to go. What are we going to do?" "My car's parked behind us." His face was white, ashy. "We got to make a break for it. There's a back way to the main road out of town, if we can just—" 2 things suddenly happened at once. The front bay window, with its gorgeous inlay of green and blue stained glass, suddenly exploded. Then Arjun, covered in blue and green shards, fell to the ground screaming. His right leg was shattered, and I could see bones sticking out through his shin. Monroe then started losing it. She started charging at the front door, pulling Arjun along in the process. "No, Monroe!" Without thinking, I grabbed Arjun and hoisted him up. He was crying, tears running down his face, and I pulled his arm over my shoulder. Slipping on the broken glass, I half-yanked, half-shoved all 4 of us to the back door. Monroe was barking furiously, with foam literally dripping from her mouth. I kicked open the back door. There. The dark red Pontiac was right underneath us. "Keys, Arjun!" I screamed, but he wasn't paying attention to me. I could hear the SUV's brakes screaming as they squealed to a stop. I tried the car door. Thank God it was unlocked. I threw the duffel bags into the back seat and threw Arjun in after. "Arjun, the keys! Give me the keys! I need to get you to a hospital. But he wasn't listening to me. I threw myself into the back seat and desperately tried searching his pockets. Is Milo okay? Arjun was bleeding everywhere. Is my baby okay? Is Milo okay? Oh God. He was out of his mind and I could tell I was losing him. I sat up and slapped him. He's fine, I yelled. Where did you put the keys? Suddenly there was an explosion of glass. The passenger side window exploded, with glass and metal flying everywhere. I threw up my arm but was too late, as shards sliced deeply into my face. And Monroe lost her mind. Her eyes shining a bright white, foam dripping from her lips and her black fur standing on end. She started throwing herself at the door. Arjun, sobbing, tried to hold her back. There. My heart stopped. I held up the keys. Got you! With a deafening roar, the Pontiac howled to life. I whipped the car around, grinding the tires into the asphalt. An overwhelming smell of burning rubber flooded through the broken window. The back road from Arjun's duplex cut through a dense thicket of forestry that separated his isolated complex from the rest of the town. You had to take a sharp right into the forest, and that led straight through to the downtown area. The road was bumpy and full of treacherously deep potholes, but I knew we'd be safe if we managed to make it into the thick vegetation. He's gonna die in the back seat, I thought to myself. I couldn't catch my breath. I could feel myself on the very edge of a massive panic attack. First Paula, now him. I can't let him die. I won't let this happen again. Stay with me, Arjun. I glanced back at him. He looked pale. You'll be okay, buddy. Hang in there, buddy. You'll be... Okay, I love you, but shut up, Aimee. Arjun grunted, spitting up glass. No hospitals. Take me to Jack. I was flabbergasted. Arjun, you've got a fucking bone sticking out. Jack and his Boy Scout first aid skills aren't going to help you. God damn it, no hospitals! Arjun screamed. Go to Jack's. He's staying at his dad's house. Okay, fine, I yelled back. Fine, I said again, quieter. But only because you're dying, Arjun. Only reason I'm going to my ex's house. We were about to take the turn away from Arjun's duplex, and I glanced quickly one last time in the rearview mirror to make sure we weren't being followed. A flash of bright white caught my eye. A man, dressed in an all-white suit, was standing at the back door. He was pale, even paler than I, and his blonde hair was slicked straight back. On his right wrist was a thick black bracelet, like the ones we used to purchase from Hot Topic. The asshole was waving goodbye. I flipped him off. When I awoke, I realized I was in the middle of a river of dead bodies. I gagged and spit, salt water flooding my lungs, and I fought to keep breathing. The bodies smashed into me, enormous waves pushing and pulling and sucking me underwater. I was pulled under. Salt water flooded my lungs again, and I felt myself on the verge of convulsing. Suddenly, I felt the bodies part, and I clawed my way back to the surface. Salt water exploded from my nose like a fountain of blood gushing from an open wound. I managed to grab hold of a piece of timber that came rushing past me. I pulled myself onto it. My fingernails popped and tore as I dug my fingers into the shredded bark, but at least now my head was above the water. Only then did I realize where I was. I was in the midst of a great flood, cutting a path through an enormous forest. It was like I was in water released from an enormous dam as the flood rushed without thought or purpose. It was pure, unreleased chaos, and I could feel its anger tearing apart the forest. By the light of an enormous full moon, which hung low, filling almost the entire night sky, I could see myself lifted above the forest, rushing past the tops of trees. Where was I rushing from? Keeping a firm grip on the piece of wood, I struggled to look behind me as bodies and parts of bodies smashed into me. A wave caught me and I spun, twisting me around. I wiped the salt water from my eyes. It was huge. More than 100 feet tall, maybe 200 feet tall. It towered over the tops of the trees we were rushing past, and more than 100 feet wide, and it wasn't moving with the water. Even as the enormous waves smashed against it, the black, stalwart, sinewy body swayed from side to side, but it wasn't falling. It looked like it was standing up. Cain! My eardrums exploded in pain, and my world exploded into fire. My eardrums, are they bleeding? It feels like they're bleeding. But I didn't dare move my hands, so I put my head down, gritted my teeth, and prayed that my eardrums could survive the onslaught. Then suddenly, it stopped. My ears ringing, I looked up. The body was moving, growing. There were things extending from its sides, Long, slender legs like an octopus, tentacles, hundreds of them. They grew and grew in all directions until they blotted out the moon. Everywhere, they were everywhere above me, and I was underneath in their shadow. Then, with a horrifying cracking sound, the tentacles then started to drop. Vomit erupted from my mouth, coating the front of my gray sweatshirt. I felt seasick, as the salt water and dead bodies were washed out by the sounds and smells of Tuolumne Hospital. Arjun's heart monitor beeped as I grabbed hold of his hospital bed to steady myself. But the waves threatened to pull me under, and I started to slide off my chair. Suddenly, I felt someone grab me. "Holy shit, Aimee, you okay?" My heart jumped uncomfortably in my chest. "Jack, hi." My back was cramped and sore from the uncomfortable hospital chair. I must have fallen asleep waiting for Arjun to wake up after being wheeled out of surgery. "You got my text." I checked the time. Almost 1 o'clock. It had been almost 4 hours since I'd basically crashed in the emergency lane at Tuolumne and thrown Arjun on a gurney myself. "When did you get here?" "Just got here." He gestured to his EMT uniform. "I'm on lunch break." Jack was pre-med at the nearby Columbia College and worked at Tuolumne Hospital part-time as an EMT. Arjun left a voicemail saying he'd gotten into a car accident? But then you texted to meet here? I don't understand. Were you with him? Paula, leaving my house in the middle of the night, crashing at Arjun's, discovering that Arjun has been investigating my sister's disappearance. The photos of the missing girls, all 10 girls, missing. Then suddenly, hearing something outside. Black SUVs rushing toward Arjun's house, making a break for it, and Arjun getting shot. Then, the car windows shot out. Glass everywhere. Arjun leaving Jack a panicked voicemail, then passing out. Me, seeing all the blood, deciding to take Arjun to the hospital instead. But his questions just washed over me like the salt water from my dream. I was covered in vomit. "God, this is so gross," I whimpered, as I desperately searched for a rag or towel or anything I could use to clean myself. Jack noticed. "Aimee Bell here. Let me help you." He helped me pull off the gray sweatshirt, his old nickname for me. I caught a glimpse of myself in the full-length mirror. I looked sick, sweaty, and my tight white t-shirt and the matching gray sweatpants looked dirty and wrinkled. My heart twisted. God, I looked terrible. "Jesus, Aimee," Jack said slowly. "Why are there shards of glass in your face?" He reached out to touch them. "And all down your arm, too?" He stood up and started bustling around. From the cabinets, he pulled out gauze, rubbing alcohol and tweezers. "Let me get that glass out." "Come on, dude, stop." I tried to push him away. I could feel tears in my eyes, and I was trying to not get overwhelmed. But he was too close to me, and I wasn't sure what to do, or what to say. The last 3 years of unanswered text messages and unanswered feelings hung like a curtain between us. It didn't help that he looked the exact same too. Same dark eyes, same dark skin. His dreads were a little longer, I noticed, but that was it. He was wearing new glasses too. I wonder if the new girlfriend got those glasses for him. He grabbed my hands, interrupting my thoughts. "You'll get infected if the glass doesn't come out." "Seriously, Jack Jenkins? Threatening me with infection? Could you just..." He held up his hands. "How about this? For every glass shard I pull out of your face, I get to ask a question. After all, I did get a frantic phone call from Arjun this morning who insisted I meet him. Then I got an equally frantic text from you saying that Arjun was in surgery. He does have a point." "Fine," I relented. "Thank you," he said snippily. He then dug a little too happily into my face and I winced. "Okay, there. First question. Why did Arjun want to meet at my house and not the hospital?" I sighed. "I'm not sure. Maybe he doesn't have health insurance?" I sighed again. "He passed out before I could get an answer from him." Jack nodded, then leaned in again. God, he even smelled the same. "There. Okay, question 2. Why did you bring him to the hospital instead?" I sighed. "Because Arjun's got that fucking heart condition, and he was dying, and he was being an idiot, and he had just gotten shot, and... shit." The truth slipped out. Crap, shit. I pressed the heels of my hands into my forehead. There was so much happening, and I was just so tired. Jack stopped short, too. "Wait, shot? Like with a gun? I thought you said in the text that it was a car accident?" Well, it was kind of that, too," Jack interrupted me. "Aimee?" He grabbed the sides of my face, My skin burned where he touched me. Be honest with me. Is this a drug thing? A drug thing. Of course, he thought it was that. That's all I'll ever be to him. Every pill, every mistake, the 5 years I spent dating him reared up like a snake, threatening to bite. Those 3 little words tore me apart, tore my chest apart like I was nothing. Because I was nothing. Especially to Jack Jenkins. No, Jack, it wasn't a drug thing. Then what is it? His grip tightened. It's been 3 years, Aimee. 3 years since I've heard from you, since I've seen you. Since any of us, besides Arjun, have seen you. 3 years since. 3 years since one of the worst days of my life. We were at a picnic organized by our parents. We were all there, including all our parents, everyone except for my mom. Mine and Jack's 5th year anniversary was coming up. We felt it was a big accomplishment at the age of 18. Part of that, though, was the condition that I quit abusing Xanax and alcohol. Jack thought I was quitting. He thought that because I told him I was. And honest to God, I tried. I really did. But every time I did quit and I flushed those pills down the drain, that's when the feelings started happening again. And the only way to stop them was to make myself numb. Jack caught me with a pill bottle and ended it right then and there. Hey, Aimee? Jack gently tapped the palms of my hands. Hey, you went somewhere. I forced myself back into the present. The dreams dissipated, leaving me in my disappointing reality. His words layered me like concrete, pushing my feelings down even further. I felt numb and cold. What? His eyes looked sad, resigned. I asked, why did you come back, Aimee? Because fuck you, Jack. Because Paula's back, Jack, I said simply. And I need you to contact Louise for me because I'm pretty sure she knows why. The look on his face was priceless, but I suddenly felt sick. The words had felt like bile and acid. They'd burned, leaving my mouth, and I felt like they were slowly eating me alive. I stood up, feeling a little wobbly in the knees. Here, I handed him my phone. There's a video I need you to see. Jack took it. Code? All zeros. Jack punched it in. The phone lit up. He looked at me, and his lip curled for a brief moment. Tight security? But I ignored him. I'm going to get some food. Please keep an eye on Arjun until I get back. The second he wakes up, we need to leave. My stomach grumbled as I wandered down the hall from Arjun's room. I was looking for the vending machines. They'd put him in a recovery room, upstairs in the northeast wing. To Alumni Hospital was in the shape of a perfect square, with hallways running north-south and east-west. At the entrance, there's a help desk, which welcomes you in, surrounded by a ring of offices and blood-testing lab facilities. The trauma center, where Arjun had been wheeled into, and urgent care are also on the first floor. Upstairs on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. You'd find the more specialist units, such as cardiology or coronary care unit, intensive care unit, neurology, cancer center, and obstetrics and gynecology. There. Found them. I wandered over to the familiar blue light, like a moth to flame. I rested my forehead against the cool glass, as the events from this morning washed over me. Arjun got shot, I thought. Because of me. My throat felt thick and I struggled to swallow. I forced myself to fight back tears. Arjun could have died, as that man in the white suit shot into the goddamn car. The sensation of the exploding glass gripped me again and again. Another person dead? Because of me. My breathing got short, and the edges of my vision started to go white. No, calm down. I balled my hands into fists and forced myself to breathe deep. You cannot afford a panic attack. Not now. With everything that was swimming around in my brain, there were only 2 things I knew for certain at this moment. 1, I hadn't eaten since yesterday, and that stale bag of Cheetos in row E4 was looking delicious. And 2, me and Arjun needed to get the fuck out of this hospital. Although I wasn't sure where we'd go. Maybe my apartment? We could hide out there until we figured out what to do. I wiped the tears from my eyes and punched in 4 quarters. The Cheetos fell to the drawer and I bent down to pick them up. In the reflection of the glass, I suddenly recognized someone very familiar starting to walk up the hallway behind me. Hide. I need somewhere to hide. Desperate, I scanned the hallway. There were a series of offices, with doors emblazoned with names that I assumed were doctors and specialists. Then, supply closet. Without a second to lose, I opened the door and ducked inside. My heart pounding, I listened as my mother walked into the office directly next to me. Jay! My mother's shrill voice slurred. Do you think it's wise to keep calling these meetings, especially with everything that's happening? The reason I called you here, Cassandra. A voice I'd recognize anywhere answered her. It was Dr. Jenkins. My blood ran cold, and I started to panic. I can't get caught, not now. To steady myself, I shoved my hands into the pockets of my sweatpants. There was something hard in them. I pulled it out. It was the tape recorder I always kept on me. Without even thinking, I turned it on. Is because your daughter is fucking missing. I beg your pardon, Jay. Language. She sounded drunk. My blood curdled at the sound. She's at home. Where else? Dr. Jenkins interrupted her. Not that daughter. I heard exasperation in his voice. Aimee. Where the hell did Aimee go? I was feeling lightheaded. Holy fuck, they were looking for me? There was a crack of light where the supply closet connected to Dr. Jenkins's office. I could see through it and see my mother, standing in her powder blue skirt suit, looking down at Dr. Jenkins, who was sitting behind his mahogany desk. My mother's tone was loud and dismissive. How should I know? She's probably back at school. You don't know. Dr. Jenkins put his fist down hard on his desk. You don't know? She's not at school, nor at her apartment. We checked this morning. And she's not at your house either. So I ask again, where is she? Why do you care? We care. I suddenly realized my mother and Dr. Jenkins weren't alone in his office. There was a group of adults sitting in there with them, including Arjun's parents, Arjav and Raji. His mother, Raji, sounded like she'd been crying. My heart twisted. I love Arjun's parents. They ran a chain of candy shops in Grovefield, and I used to love getting candy from them as a kid. Even now, as an adult, it was such an instant hit of euphoric happiness every time I visited. I was happy they were still open, considering that I've never actually seen anyone buy anything there. Because apparently, there's been a shooting on Connor Street and Arjun... Your son was involved in that? My mother suddenly sounded shocked. Is he okay? But the church said that the man in white, Arjun's fine. Arjav, his dad, spoke up. I couldn't see them, not in the position I was sitting in, but his voice sounded sharp, electric. He's alive, for now, but apparently he was shot. He's at this hospital in room 182. I was flabbergasted. His parents know he was shot. Do they know why? Why haven't they done anything? My brain was spinning in circles, and suddenly I was having a hard time breathing. But before we go see him, we need to know what they know. Cassandra, Jay spoke up again. He sounded closer to me. He must be leaning back in his chair. This is starting to unravel. And at the center of it are your daughters. My daughters? Her voice positively dripped acid. Her tone went scary low and quiet. They're such a tiny part of this. How dare you insinuate that Aimee, the drunk and the almost dropout, or that my Paula would... Even the tiniest thread, Arjav suddenly whispered, can pull apart the greatest tapestry. His voice was so low I could barely hear him. And you, in your arrogance and blind faith, brought that loose end home. Anger was thickening his voice. You brought that thing home and exposed Aimee. Smack! Arjav was cut off, as I suddenly heard my mother slap him hard across the face. How dare you! She kept shrieking as I heard pandemonium in his office. Chairs scuffed hard against the linoleum. Stacks of binders were shoved to the floor. A desk lamp was overturned. How dare you call her that? Calm down! Dr. Jenkins sprang to his feet and forced them apart. Cassandra, stop! Calm down! I spotted my mother through the crack in the door. Her blue suit was disheveled and her shiny exterior shell was beginning to crack. Dr. Jenkins turned a chair upright and gently pushed her to sit. We just need to know. Has Paula said anything to you? To Aimee? To your husband? Specifically, has she said anything to you about the mountain? My mother was sitting perfectly still, her posture as stiff and unforgiving as that chair. Her hands twisted the strap of her powder blue handbag, like she was twisting the top off a Diet Coke bottle. No, she hasn't said anything. Her handbag was clinking gently. In fact, her voice went thick with emotion. She hasn't said anything at all. She also doesn't eat. She doesn't do anything. She's a shell. She was crying harder now, with her elbows on her knees and her hands cradling her head. After all these years, I still don't understand. She wasn't supposed to be taken. I was promised. She looked at Dr. Jenkins with red-rimmed eyes. I did everything right. I loved the church. And this is how I'm repaid? Jesus, Cassandra, this same old shit? Suddenly, another voice. A man standing to the right of Dr. Jenkins' desk. I couldn't see him, but I'd recognize that voice too. It was Louise and Daphne's father, Roger Tiths. You aren't the only one that's missing a child. Their father was a quiet but imposing man. Roger Tiths owned a series of incredibly successful laundromats, and he'd moved to Grovefield right after Daphne was born, and right after he'd lost their mother to a horrific car accident. The driver had walked, not only from his destroyed vehicle, but from the following case trial as well. Roger had lost everything. He'd moved to Grovefield right after with his 2 young daughters, a newborn and a 9-year-old, and he'd always said that it was his only chance to recover what was lost. My mother sniffled. She was a pitiful sight. But you have your business at least? Yes, but Daphne wasn't part of the deal. He turned to Dr. Jenkins. Neither was Paula. We have only 3 weeks until... He paused. But it feels different this time, stronger. He paused again. He sounded different. It took me a moment to realize why. He sounded scared. It feels unbalanced, he murmured. Do you think the head knows, Jay? Jesus, how can you say that? Dr. Jenkins retorted loudly. God no, if the head finds out. All our kids, Aimee, Arjun, Jack, Louise, they're all dead. We're dead. Anybody connected to this. Jesus, I thought to myself, horrified. What is going on? What are our parents involved in? I want out, my mother sniffed loudly. I want to be done. The room was silent. Nobody said anything, except for my mother's loud sniffs. You can't get out, Cassie, you know that, Dr. Jenkins finally said softly. We all went to the mountain for a reason. He looked tired, haggard, and he was wearing a white lab coat over black, wrinkled scrubs. As he bent down to pick up the binders that had knocked to the floor, I noticed something. There were thick black leather bracelets encircling his wrists like handcuffs. They were strapped tight to his skin, practically cutting the circulation off, and it looked like his wrists were bleeding. No, that's not blood, I suddenly realized. Thin black vines extended from the bracelets and were burrowing themselves into his skin. I recoiled. And now we need to deal with the consequences. Suddenly, my legs gave out. I tried to stop myself, but I fell hard, accidentally knocking over a stack of buckets. I heard someone cry out in Dr. Jenkins's office, but I didn't wait to see who it was. I turned off the tape recorder and sprinted out into the hallway. Arjun was just waking up by the time I made it back. Jack was standing over him, helping him sit up. The hospital computer was beeping frantically, and in one furious motion, I bent down and unplugged it. It went silent. Aimee, what the fuck? Jack said. I gripped his arm, hard. We need to leave, now. I couldn't think straight. All I could see were those black bracelets burrowing into Jack's dad's arms. I turned to Arjun. Can you walk? Aimee? Arjun was loopy, I could tell, but surprisingly coherent. He was struggling to sit up, but the drug's effect was very slowly wearing off. Hey, Aimee. He grabbed my hand. Hey, you didn't leave me back there. Thank you. Oh, Arjun. I cupped his hand and brought it to my cheek. For a brief second, I forgot about Dr. Jenkins. I forgot about the bracelets. I forgot about my mom racing down the hallway to find me. Don't even say that. Intense relief washed over me. He was alive. Of course I didn't leave you. You had the car keys. Arjun chuckled, sitting up, but his expression quickly turned sour. Wait, are we in the hospital? Jack leaned over to help him up. Aimee felt like because of the seriousness of your leg, you needed more serious help. Fuck, Arjun said, cutting him off. I mean, thank you, but I don't think you realize that... What? That all our parents are involved in this? Including Jack's dad? Dr. J. Jenkins? I finished the sentence for him. I handed him his blue robe from earlier and a gray tracksuit that Jack had brought. Wait, my dad is involved in what? Jack asked, shocked. I overheard them. He's here. All our parents are here. Now, in this hospital. I was helping Arjun up. And they know. Know about what? About this! I gestured wildly. About me ditching my parents' house, about Arjun getting shot, about Paula coming back as this fucked up demonic shell. I could feel my mother's words echoing inside me. We need a plan. Wait, hold up. Jack held up his hands. What does my dad have to do with that? He pointed to my phone. And And with Paula coming back, because first starters, he was the first fucking person to see her, besides that ranger and my parents. He was with her every second she spent at his godforsaken hospital. I was at the end of my rope. I could practically feel my mother racing down the hall to catch me. We needed to leave, and now. And he didn't say anything to you? Don't you find that a little suspicious? But Jack was shaking his head. There's gotta be some sort of explanation. We need to leave. I'll explain on the way. I picked up Arjun's bag and helped him up. Everything else we had was in the Pontiac, along with Milo and Monroe, who were waiting for us. Wait, shit. I paused in the doorway. Where should we go? My apartment's out. Jack's dad was there this morning, I said, panicking. Arjun's home is out. My parents' house has this fucking thing crawling around and... But Jack interrupted me. The cabin. You could hide out there for as long as you need. Duh, the cabin. I didn't even think of that. That was the perfect place. You sure? But he was nodding. The elevators dinged and we descended to the ground floor. We were almost out. The parking lot was right through the entrance doors. I could practically see the Pontiac from where we were. In the back corner, where I'd haphazardly parked it this morning. Jesus, the Pontiac looked bad. There was glass everywhere, all over the passenger seat, and the entire back seat was coated in blood. Jack took his jacket off and laid it down before helping Arjun into the back seat. Monroe and Milo went crazy, whining and licking him. I paused, my hand resting on the door handle. Look, Stop. Gently grabbing my arm, he turned me around to face him, but I couldn't stop. The words kept pouring out. Look, I just wanted to thank you. Aimee, stop. He brushed a curl from where it had fallen over my eye. I'm coming too. My heart thudded. You're what? He nodded. After my shift. He started walking backwards towards his car, an old beat-up white Subaru. After all, I've got to finish fixing you up, he called out. You still remember where the cabin is? Oh, I remember. I was on Main Street, heading out of town. Arjun had passed out as the adrenaline from this morning wore off, and the events from this morning knocked him out. I'd stopped briefly for snacks and water. We were about to drive 8 hours, and I was still starving. There was a lot of traffic, and I was stopped, waiting to pull out of the gas station. That's when I saw it. There was an accident up ahead. It looked horrific. A car had flipped across the meridian and struck a small Honda Civic. Accidents always got bad during tourist season down here. Sometimes it was road rage, sometimes drunk driving, sometimes just carelessness. Out of the small, crushed Honda Civic, it looked like only one person had survived. A woman, weeping, was sitting by the side of the road watching, as the ambulance was being loaded up with the bodies of her companions. But as the ambulance pulled away, I suddenly realized something. She wasn't alone, because standing behind her was the man in white. You're not supposed to travel these roads at night. They say it's because they're too narrow and too wild that it'd be easy to pop a tire. That these roads are so isolated that it'd take hours for anyone to find you. Travel during the day, they say. Stick to the paved roads around these wild woods, and whatever you do, avoid any shortcuts that cut straight through. Heed this warning and heed this rhyme, especially if you were to find yourself at the Sweet Hollow Pass. Look, I was tired. I hadn't eaten in almost 24 hours. Arjun had fallen asleep hours ago, after valiantly trying to fight the medication the hospital had injected him with. I didn't even have him to distract me as my eyelids were growing heavier by the second. I was desperate, and the Sweet Hollow Pass was a shortcut that cut through the tail end of the Six Rivers National Forest. Instead of taking Highway 93 all the way around, the pass cut straight through, shaving almost 3 hours off the trip. I could feel my eyelids drooping heavier by the second, so I needed to do something. Anything. Swallowing hard, I took the hard right off Highway 93 and onto Sweet Hollow Pass. They say somebody died out here. Another tourist told me that, during the summer after our freshman year, Jack, Louise, and I had been working in gift shops around Six Rivers when we first heard about it. Almost 10 years ago, a woman, around 30 years old and traveling by herself, tried to take the shortcut through Sweet Hollow Pass. It had been a particularly rainy summer after a very hard and dry winter, and too much rain in too short of time had led to horrific and cataclysmic mudslides. Apparently, she'd been caught in a freak one, according to the police. After another 6 hours of searching, they managed to find her car. But they never found her. And they never did find the body. They say that on misty, foggy nights, like the night that she disappeared, if you're traveling on Sweet Hollow Pass, that Sally Gray will try to find you instead. Don't think about that, I muttered to myself. Don't fucking think about that. I checked the GPS. It was a miracle I still had service out here. 15 miles, it blinked in fluorescent blue light. 20 minutes, I whispered. It was so dark outside. Trees pressed close, the canopy blocking any hint of moonlight from above, and the windshield was fogging up. I cursed quietly. It was impossible to see outside. I curled my sweatshirt over my fist and reached up, using it to wipe away the condensation. Suddenly, I could see through a tiny sliver. Shit! I cried and turned the steering wheel hard. Heart pounding, I felt the passenger tires skim the edge of an enormous pothole. The car dipped hard, the back tires spinning out, but carefully, I felt us move past. Chest tight, I let out a sigh of relief. But it didn't last long. Fuck! I yelled as I hit the brakes again. The car swerved, rear tires spinning again in the mud, but I brought us to a complete stop. Breathing hard, I glanced over at Arjun. He was still out cold. Panic setting in, and the edges of my vision threatening to go white. I peered through that tiny sliver in my windshield. The air left my lungs. Arjun, I whispered, reaching over. I shook him, my eyes still staring straight ahead. Arjun, wake up. Nothing. He was out cold. My mouth went dry. There was a girl standing in the road. She was streaked with mud from head to toe like she'd crawled from a shallow grave. Her chin was tucked into her chest, and all I could see was a head of thick, curly brown hair. She was swaying uneasily in the car's headlights, like she was drugged. I squinted. It looked like she was wearing something black around her wrists. Bracelets? Rope? Broken handcuffs, maybe? I really couldn't see through the fogged-up windshield. Slowly, carefully, I rolled the window down. Miss? I called out quietly. Are you lost? My voice fell flat against the silent forest. I hadn't realized how quiet it had gotten. The girl visibly started at the sound of my voice. Her body twisted like she didn't have any control over it. One green eye peeked at me from underneath the mop of curly brown hair. Then another. She was grinning. Horrifically. Her mouth was stretched horribly, the lips literally going from ear to ear. Yellowed, rotten teeth peeked through. That's when I realized something. I felt all the air leave my lungs. Holy shit, I cried, not caring if I finally woke Arjun up. I can't believe it. She looks like me. Aimee, huh? I suddenly snapped back to Arjun, hitting my shoulder. Hard. What's going on? You tell me, Arjun said uneasily. He was sitting leaning over me and had my shoulder in a death grip. You were zoned out and staring straight ahead. I just woke up to find us sitting in the middle of freaking Sweet Hollow Pass. The girl in the road. I whipped around, my heart beating furiously and my eyes searching desperately. There was no sign of her. I could feel the engine humming underneath my shaking hands. The girl! Did you see her? See who? Arjun said quietly, his eyes never leaving me. The girl! She looked like... I whipped around again, searching valiantly around the car. Nothing. No trace of her. Looked like me. She looked like... You? Arjun said cautiously. Aimee, he said quietly. Are you seeing things? I swallowed uneasily. Had I fallen asleep without realizing it? While driving? But it felt so real. Cautiously, I settled back into my seat. Heart pounding, I tried to put a lid on the wild panic I felt in my chest. Carefully keeping my expression neutral, I put the car back into drive. You're right, I said quietly. It was probably nothing. It wasn't until we left the forest and the tires finally hit asphalt did I finally take a breath. We were almost there. Jack's cabin sat almost directly in the center between the town of Willow Creek and the Hoopa Indian Reservation, and alongside the very edge of the Six Rivers National Forest. We were heading to the small town of Burnt Towers. Burnt Towers was a tiny, unincorporated town of only 300 individuals. However, the proximity to Six Rivers and the breathtaking rolling hills of green in the summer and the changing leaves in the fall made it an extremely popular tourist spot. Legend has it that Burnt Towers got its name from a pair of enormous structures that suddenly appeared at the entrance of the town almost 200 years ago. Seemingly overnight, these 40-feet-tall monstrosities were erected without nary a clue as to who actually built them. And there they stood, until one night, At 3 o'clock in the morning, the locals woke up to them entirely engulfed in flames. The fire was massive, hot, and raging out of control. There was nothing anybody could do. The fire service from the nearby town of Cedar Flats had been called, but by the time they'd gotten here, it was too late. The towers had completely burnt down. Hence, the name. Burnt Towers. Burnt Towers had one main road in town. There was a gas station, a bank, a grocery store, a hardware store, several stores filled with outdoor and hiking-type gear, and several restaurants. There were a few speakeasies and dive bars too, but they were located a little further down. There were 5 main offshoots from the downtown area, mainly neighborhoods, which is where all the locals lived, and hotels. The park that we used to play at was back here too. Jack's cabin was located off one of those main offshoots. It was located a few miles outside town, at the very top of a large hill. It was just as beautiful as I remembered. A large, white, Victorian-style cabin with flowers climbing the large columns that stood on either side of the front door. The flowers climbed the side of the house and spilled out onto the large, wraparound porch. This place had been built with love. Jack's dad had built it for Jack's mom, after she'd been diagnosed with a rare kidney disorder almost 30 years ago. A good luck charm, he called it. It must have worked because after moving to Grovefield, Jack's mom had managed to outlast the diagnosis for almost 30 years. A living medical miracle, they called her, until she passed away almost 14 years ago. I turned my phone over, the white light brightening the dim back patio. The screen clicked on. Nothing. Of course, I muttered, as my heart sank. Jack hadn't texted me. I shouldn't be surprised. Despite what he'd said to me almost 10 hours ago in the parking lot of the Tuolumne Hospital, I doubt he was actually still considering meeting us. There was too much going on for him to just drop everything. He had work, he had school, he had his girlfriend. I shook my head, but I couldn't help but feel the echoes of his words. I could see him in my mind's eye, and my cheek still burned from where he'd touched it. Of course, I'm meeting you, Aimee, he'd said to me in that parking lot. He'd promised me. Somebody has to finish fixing you up. I shook my head again, hard. Fuck, I couldn't afford to think like that now, and I took a sip of tea to clear my head. It clicked gently on the patio table, next to the binders from Arjun's basement. They were the ones I'd snatched, desperately, before we were forced to make a break for it. They were filled with maps, missing persons reports dating back almost 60 years ago, and pages of tightly packed handwritten notes. I didn't understand it, and frankly, it was making my head hurt. I shook my head again. I needed Arjun to wake up and explain. With a sigh, I sat back in my seat, thinking about everything that had transpired in the last 2 days. 3 weeks, I murmured quietly to myself. What's happening in 3 weeks? Monroe was sitting outside with me, and she was tilting her head back and forth, as if she was listening. I looked down at her. I don't suppose you know what Louise's dad meant when he said, "It's happening in 3 weeks"? Monroe cocked her head and let out a low woof. I laughed. I don't know either, girl. I rubbed my temples hard, feeling the bones of my knuckles grind against my skull. Of course, except for one thing. Monroe was still watching me, her eyes intently focused on mine. The anniversary of Paula's disappearance. I sighed again. And at the rate everything's going, I'm sure something fucking horrible is going to happen. I reached over for the teacup, accidentally swatting a firefly that had landed on it. Oh, I'm sorry, little guy, I whispered as I pulled my hand away. It flew away, dipping and weaving, like a drunk man leaving a bar. I looked up. The whole backyard was filled with them. The fireflies looked like flickering stars, coming down for a brief visit. It was beautiful. With how they clustered around the tops of trees and in the bushes and grass, it looked like the entire backyard was on fire. Ugh. I rubbed my temples again. My head was killing me. This headache had started not long after the little drive through Sweet Hollow Pass. I used to get these horrible mind-splitting headaches as a kid. The kind where it felt like something fat and horrible had taken a shit on your brain, and it also left behind something that was now slowly hatching inside your skull. For months, my mom had been convinced it was just migraines. Migraines? Doctors questioned, perplexed, when my dad finally took me in. But what 4-year-old gets migraines? Of course, it probably didn't help that I was introduced to Xanax not long after this. I dug my fingernails into my thigh, forcing the fog to part and my head to clear. Look, I thought to myself, it's been almost 6 years since I'd gotten one. This is probably just stress-related. I tilted the teacup back, chugging the rest of it. I'd go buy some Advil in the morning. Come on, Monroe. I tapped my thigh, motioning to her, and headed inside, locking the patio door behind me. By the time I woke up, my headache had gotten worse. Instead of just the throbbing headache from last night, it now felt like my brain was trying to dismember itself piece by piece and squeeze the brain tissue through both ear canals. I sat up, clutching my head. Fuck, I moaned. My feet touched the bare hardwood floors and I shivered. It was freezing. I heaved myself up and stumbled around, searching in vain for the keys. In my haste, I accidentally smacked into Morno, who was laying at the foot of the bed. She let out a loud woof, throwing me an incredibly judgmental look. I laughed. It was the same look she used to give me when in high school I'd sneak in through the oversized doggy door to sleep at Arjun's because I was high as a kite and avoiding my dad. But I knew what would change her mind. Want to go for a ride? The bell dinged as I walked into Ms. Key's general store. Burnt Towers was empty this morning, as apparently 7 in the morning was still a little early for people, I guess. The scent of pine needles, deck stain, and leather oil pulled me in like a hug, and I took a deep sniff. I let it out. Everything was exactly the same. The lines of fishing poles stacked against the far wall. The cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling and filled with packets of ramen, cereal, and the protein bars that always crumbled into dust every time you bit into them. This is where we used to get our gear for the long camping trips that were the hallmark of our summers in Burnt Towers. I bet if I looked, I could find the old aluminum flask that Jack and I had hidden inside one of the popcorn ceiling tiles when I worked here during the summer before our sophomore year. That flask of Jameson kept me blessedly numb from the chaos that always came with the crazy summer tourist months. Tap, tap, tap. Suddenly, I heard the familiar sound of spurs on a hardwood floor. Is that Ms. Aimee I see lurking around my store again? I felt myself light up into a smile. Miss Keys, I cried. She was in the backs of the store, smoking a cigarette behind the cash registers. A Marlboro Light. I'd recognize that plume of smoke anywhere. She used to go through a pack a day. Despite all efforts from local authorities, you just couldn't keep me away. I laughed. She tapped the cigarette in her trademark ceramic cowboy hat ashtray, ashing it. She grumbled. I can remember a time or two when the cops came calling to my door. She cracked a grin. And you ain't even my baby! What'll it be today, sweetheart? She slapped both hands on the thick carved desk. Look, she eagerly pointed. We've got some new items I think you'd be interested in. She held up a silver and red latest edition S14 German Swiss Army knife. Brand new and fresh off the boat. No, I begged her off, holding up my hands. Not today, just these. On the counter, I had set a jumbo-sized bottle of Advil and a bag of Purina dog food. Advil, huh? She rested one sharp eye on me. You're getting headaches again? Her brow furrowed as her dark gray eyebrows pulled together. She looked concerned. Her gray hair, which I could remember used to be the same shade as her smoky, dark brown eyes, was pulled back into a severe bun. Her tanned, olive skin contrasted sharply against the thick, white cable-knit sweater she had on. I thought those had gone away? I winced again. The headache was beginning to pick up speed, like a storm gathering in the horizon. I cracked open the bottle and quickly downed a couple, hoping that this would stave it off. But as the pills slid down my throat, I suddenly felt a strong wave of dizziness. Whew! I swallowed hard, as everything threatened to come back up. I'm sorry, is there somewhere I can sit down? Sure, hun. Ms. Keys's spurs clinked as she pulled me around and into the back office. I felt her hands on my shoulders as she half pushed, and I half fell, into an uncomfortable, straight-backed chair. I tried to swallow, wincing painfully as my throat felt dry and scratchy. Ms. Keys noticed. Sit tight, she cried. Let me get you some water, too. Fuck! My head was throbbing. Pressing the palms of my hands against my temples, I sighed and looked around. Literally nothing had changed since the last time I was here. A large shelving unit, filling almost the entire back wall, was filled with cardboard boxes of inventory. Fishing gear, clothing items, hats, etc. Next to the shelving unit was a small propped-up card table that we considered our break room. Considering that it was just a mini fridge and a microwave on a fold-out table, Jack always used to joke that we were one smelly fish sandwich away from total disaster. But wait, I paused. This was new. I got up and walked over for a better look. I felt dizzy as all the blood rushed to my head. "Have you seen me?" screamed down at me from 100 different posters. Missing. Hundreds of faces jumped out at me. Men, women, children. It looked like every age and race was up on that board. Ms. Keys had hung a giant orange cork board that was filled with missing posters. Stunned and momentarily forgetting the roaring headache, I reached up to trace the face of a missing child. Betty Ingram, I read, my voice catching my throat. 10 years old, missing in Yosemite National Park. I read another one. Patricia Rose, aged 45 years old. Last seen in Six Rivers National Park. My voice cracked. Tom Parker, 21 years old. Reported missing after friends woke up to find him gone from their campsite in Tahoe National Forest. I checked the dates. A shiver ran through me. These were all dated from the past 10 years. Beatrice Montclair, age 31, reported missing after she didn't return from a hike in... I paused. In Yosemite National Park on the Glacier Point Trail. I felt my brain churning. I stared at her photo. "What happened to you?" I whispered. Her dark eyes stared back at me, saying nothing. The longer I stared at her, the worse my headache was getting. I felt tears rise in the back of my throat as I suddenly felt an overwhelming urge to cry. Her picture blurred as they clouded my vision. What the fuck was happening out in Yosemite National Park? Fuck. I cupped my ears. The pressure in my head had gotten so bad that my ears were starting to ring. It sounded shrill, high-pitched, and like tuning into a TV channel where someone was being brutally murdered. I grimaced, glancing back at Beatrice's picture. "Is this what you sounded like right before you disappeared?" Then, as if in response to my question, her picture suddenly moved. I gasped. "No! No! No, 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 no!" I muttered frantically, screwing my eyes shut. My brain felt like it was on fire. The pressure in my ears was becoming unbearable, and most of all, I just couldn't believe that this was happening again. It's been years since... Shit, no. Stop. I wouldn't let myself think about it. I backed away from the wall, feeling behind me for the chair. My knee hit the corner of the filing cabinet hard, but I didn't dare open my eyes. My heart was pounding furiously. Where was my bag? Aimee? My eyes flew open. Ms. Keys was standing in the doorway. "Is everything all right?" she asked, looking uneasy. I must have looked silly, walking backwards with my eyes shut like that. She had a bottle of water in one hand and a hot water bottle in the other. "I'm fine," I chirped, forcing a smile on my face. "Sorry about that. I'm feeling a lot better." I headed out towards the front door, my heart pounding. "I'll call you once I'm settled in." I could hear her calling out to me as I stumbled towards the front door, but I couldn't stop. I could feel Beatrice's eyes watching me as I walked out. In a daze, I burst onto a busy sidewalk. Burnt Towers was bustling now. The shops were open. The diner I'd parked in front of was packed and people were racing around, getting ready to hit the trails early. In the morning light, flush against the normalcy of people going to breakfast with their families, the Pontiac looked bad. I winced, seeing heads turn as I opened the driver's side door, and I knew they were looking at the busted passenger window and the twisted chunks of metal and glass. I knew I should care, but I didn't. I couldn't care. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. My stomach roiled and flipped as a kaleidoscope of emotions cycled through my brain. The headache had gotten worse. Those 2 Advil I'd taken in Miss Keys's shop be damned, and the pain ebbed and flowed with the pulse of my blood. I fought back tears as I couldn't believe this was happening again. "No," I whispered. "Stop. Don't cry." I shut my eyes tightly and gripped the steering wheel. "You're gonna make it worse." I could feel my knuckles starting to turn white. It didn't help that every time I closed my eyes, every time I blinked, I could see Beatrice's face. I could still see what it looked like the second it started to move. "Fuck! Stop! Stop! Okay, stop!" I reached over to grab Monroe. "Dude, girl, stop barking." Monroe was sitting in the passenger seat, and she was absolutely losing her mind. "Girl, this isn't helping." People were sitting next to us at the patio tables of Lucky Dave's local spot, and I could feel the heat of the stares from the entire restaurant. I grabbed her collar in an attempt to calm her down. "Girl, what the fuck are you even barking at?" My voice trailed off. My blood went cold. I saw where she was looking. There was something standing behind the dumpsters at the end of the street. I leaned forward, my eyes straining. For a minute, there was nothing. Just a quiet alleyway behind the local drugstore. There. Slowly, as I watched, something peeked over the lid of the dumpsters. Then suddenly it ducked back down, like it was trying to hide. Monroe started growling again. The back of my neck started tingling. A cold sweat suddenly broke out, and I felt the ground suddenly drop out from underneath me. I'd recognize that hair anywhere. This was the same thing I'd seen back in Sweet Hollow Pass. The thing that looked like me. I smashed my eyes shut, grinding the heel of my hands into my eyes. Fuck! The building pressure in my head threatened to pop my eyes like grapes. Please be gone. Please be gone. Please be gone. I sobbed. Then I stopped. Breathing in a shuddering, stealing sense of resolve, I gingerly opened them back up. Nothing. My mind felt splintered, chaotic, and like all the pieces were slowly falling apart. I felt trapped, cornered. Like how a field mouse must feel when being stalked by a hawk. I took another big, shuddering breath in. I looked over at Monroe. She was looking at me with all the fur standing up on her back. Reaching out, I put my hand on her soft, jet black head. She was shaking. "Let's get out of here," I whispered. The drive home felt agonizingly long. It didn't help that my head was pounding, and my phone was practically ringing nonstop. Whoever this was, they'd called me like 10 times in the past 5 minutes. Without looking, I turned off the ringer and tossed it into the footwell of the passenger seat. It wasn't 5 minutes later when I finally pulled into the winding driveway that led past a pair of massive Douglas firs and up to Jack's cabin. To my surprise, Arjun was waiting for me outside. He barely waited for me to park before he threw open my door. "Aimee, I've been calling you," he said with one balled-up fist on his hip, literally like 20 times. "You can't just not pick up. There's something we need." "Oh, that was you," I mumbled, shoving him aside. The bag from Ms. Keese's swung wide and hit me hard, the Advil digging into my hip bone. "I texted and told you I was going into town." "Yeah, that was me." He sounded mad. Arjun tried to follow me, but the bulky cast on his leg slowed him down. "But that's not what we need to talk about. Aimee, listen. Can this wait until after a nap?" I could feel my body shutting down. The events from this morning were catching up to me, and I needed at least 10 more Advil in me. I walked up to the front door, with Monroe bouncing up the steps next to me. "Wait, Aimee!" I could hear Arjun crying out right behind me. "Wait, there's something I need to tell you." I swung open the front door to find a mountain of suitcases in the foyer. My heart stopped. "Oh," I said quietly. "They're here." Arjun huffed. He'd finally caught up to me. The red bathrobe he was wearing flapped as he heaved himself up the steps. "They got in about an hour ago." I could feel the wheels turning in my head. "Arjun?" I said slowly. "Who's they?" Suddenly, I heard a voice that I never thought I'd hear again. A voice that I knew belonged to my best friend in the entire world, until 3 years ago when she threatened to shoot me if I didn't leave her house and never come back. And rightfully so. "Oh, hell no!" she cried. "You've got to be fucking kidding me!" I winced. "Hi, Louise. What is she doing here?" Louise growled. Every syntax in her voice positively dripped with venom. They were all in the living room. Patrice, Mikey, Jack. The old gang was all here. Jack had brought everybody. I was stunned. I watched as she turned to Jack. "You told me she wasn't going to be here." I looked at Arjun. His face looked ashen, and his eyes wheeled wildly between me and Louise. I took a deep breath. I think now is a good time to take a nap. It was happening again. I was drowning. But it wasn't like last time. There were no bodies, no waves crashing against me. I wasn't being sucked underneath by the rip-roaring current, threatening to pull me under. No, I was sinking. My arms were outstretched above me, like I was Adam reaching for God. The white-blue light above me was fading fast, and the few bubbles that escaped my mouth looked like pearls as they drifted upwards. They wrapped around my hands, as if struggling to pull me upwards. I had to swim, I had to move, I had to do something. But I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. It's like I was frozen. Or rather, I was frozen. I strained, pushing against my limbs as hard as I could, but nothing. My hair swirled around me, a cloud of curly brown ringlets, and my ears popped, aching horribly, as I continued to sink. Down, down. I sank like a stone until the light above me faded into black. Then there was nothing. except my own consciousness, crying out against the dark. I gasped, snapping awake. My life exploded into color and sound, and my heart raced as I tried to shake the feeling from my dream. My blood pounded in my ears, and my chest hurt as I tried to slow it down. It was dark. The only source of light was the blue fluorescent light from the old-school alarm clock. It reflected eerily in the dark room. It was the same white-blue light from my dream. It took me a second to remember where I was. Then it hit me. I'm in a spare room in Jack's parents' cabin. Arjun and I got here 2 days ago after literally fleeing from Tuolumne Hospital. Arjun had just been shot in the leg, and I'd rushed him to the hospital after I witnessed him bleeding out in the back seat. Then, after being trapped in a janitor's closet and witnessing all our parents gathered in Dr. Jenkins' office discussing Paula and God knows what, Jack told us to hide out here. Jack got in last night, and he brought Louise with him. The bedroom was quiet, apart from a light buzz of conversation from the living room. Groggily, I wiped the sleep from my eyes. What woke me up? Suddenly, as if to answer my question, I heard a knock at my door, then another. Hello? I called out. The door creaked as Arjun cautiously poked his head inside. Hey, Aimee, he whispered. You're up. I am now, I grumbled. I stretched. My legs felt like pins and needles. Can I help you with something? Glancing at the alarm clock, I realized that it was 9:52 in the evening. My heart skipped a beat. I'd slept almost the entire day. Yeah. He sounded strained. He futzed with his robe for a moment, tying, then untying the belt. My heart slowed to a hard thud. Can you come out here when you're ready? He said. Monroe, who I hadn't realized was in bed with me, groaned in response. She rolled over, pulling the covers off the bed. The cold air washed over me, alighting a wave of goosebumps over my bare skin. It felt like slivers of ice. I shivered. Right now? Arjun paused. Please come out when you're ready. The room spun for a second before settling into a hard stone in the pit of my stomach. Hard as I might, I couldn't shake that feeling from my dream. The darkness, swallowing me whole. That sensation of total nothingness. I shivered. I knew what was waiting for me in the darkness. It was the same thing that waited for me in the living room. My stomach grumbled, loudly. I groaned. It was time to face the music. I shrugged on a white sweater and pants, the thick cable knit comforting me as I walked out into the living room. They'd obviously just gotten done eating dinner, as several large pizza boxes were stacked on the kitchen counter. Papa Joe's Pizzeria screamed from the boxes as a small red figurine gestured as if in mid-sniff. Tacky, but it made my stomach growl nonetheless. Suddenly, I stopped hard in my tracks. Fuck, I whispered. Everyone was here. Jack hadn't just brought Louise, he'd brought along the entire old gang. My heart leapt to my throat. Mikey and Patrice, Jack and Louise. Arjun stood watching in the kitchen as he silently filled up the dishwasher. In fact, they all fell silent as I walked in. The ghosts from my past were all here and they were staring at me. I couldn't believe it. Over the past 3 years, I'd often fantasized about this moment. The moment where we'd all be back in the same room, and we'd be forced to reckon with the choices from our past. And as the 3 years of uncertainty and silence dragged on, I'll admit that I even began to welcome the thought of reconciliation. But now, standing in front of my judge, jury, and executioner, all I wanted was to run away and hide. It was the same feeling I'd had back 3 years ago, on the day of the picnic. And like that day, I felt myself suddenly hit a dangerous breaking point. My fingernails ripped into my palms, drawing blood. Fuck this whole endeavor! My face flushed. I don't know what I thought I was doing by coming here, trying to solve this 15-year-old mystery about my sister. I felt dumb and silly and stupid. Feeling tears burning at the back of my throat, I turned to go. Suddenly, I heard a squeal. Oh, I just can't take it anymore! Patrice cried as she jumped up from the couch. Tripping over a pair of shoes, she threw her arms out and hugged me hard. I've missed you so much. I missed you too, I mumbled. She was tiny, smaller than my 5'4" frame, and the beads in her hair jangled loudly in my ear. I breathed in deep. Shea butter and lilacs. She smelled and looked the exact same. Even wearing her trademark bright colors, as today's outfit was of a bright pink sweatshirt with oversized neon green flowers. Mikey suddenly jumped up too. Are you doing a group hug without me? He leapt over the back of the couch and practically stumbled into us, almost knocking us over. We missed you, Aimee Belle. My heart twinged painfully. We called you, Patrice cried reproachfully. She pulled away. I called you. Mikey called you. Did you change your number without telling us? She says jokingly, but I can see the hurt lurking in the corners of her eyes. I know a lot has happened, and I know you said you needed time, but She gestured around. Didn't expect it to be this long. Yeah, Mikey chirps up. Did you die or something? Yeah, Patrice giggled. Did you die? Maybe she was high. Here we go. The room went silent. I looked over at Louise, my face burning with an unfamiliar heat. Louise has been waiting to say that, but before I could retort, Jack stepped in between us. His tight black sweatshirt and gray sweatpants were covered in pizza crumbs. Can I maybe get some pizza before we start this? I tried to say before Jack cut me off. Okay. He held his arms up. Just wait. We just got here. We've all been through a lot, you two especially. What happened 15 years ago with Paula and Daphne going missing. Except Daphne isn't missing. Her words dripped like acid. Jack hung his head. Again? Okay, he said placidly. Whatever happened 15 years ago, it rocked our town. And it tore apart your lives. He looked at me. I looked down, avoiding his eyes. We are all still dealing with this. Dealing with it? No, I dealt with it. Louise burst out, sounding incredulous. I'm fine. I'm not the one who showed up high to everything. My softball games, to our middle school graduation, to our high school graduation, for fuck's sake. She took a step forward, jabbing her finger into his chest. How dare you compare the two of us? Everyone always did. Her voice cracked, but she refused to waver. Meanwhile, I was there for everything. I was there for us, no matter how painful the experience was. Her dark skin burned with an uncomfortable heat, and her eyes looked red. But other than that, her perfect features didn't show a single crack in their cold marble facade. I graduated with honors. I was on the dean's list. I went to the softball championship game. I was fucking captain, for Christ's sake! She stood tall at the end of the room, like an obelisk in the desert. She was wearing just a simple white t-shirt and black athletic shorts, but at the moment, she looked regal. Her blind resolve stood steadfast, refusing to crack or chip, even as time bore down upon it. I did everything right, she finally growled. I did not allow myself to fall apart. That hung in the air for a moment, and it tore at my soul with every passing second. The room was quiet. Look, Louise, Arjun finally sighed. You can't compare how people grieve. Not everybody is strong like you. Fuck, that stung. I felt myself going numb. You're weak, echoed my brain. Powerless, pathetic. I crossed my arms tightly over my chest. Useless. God, I just wanted a slice of pizza, and a pill. Also, Arjun blindly continued, here's where I'm confused. He gestured to the group. We know there's been issues. I felt a jab in my heart. He meant the drugs, but you were always her biggest supporter. He pointed at Louise, who looked like she was close to tears. Up until the last 3 years, it was you that helped her. He looked around at everyone. We all helped, obviously, but you helped her the most. None of them knew the whole story. The shame that had been eating away at me for the last few years flared up, churning in my stomach. My body felt tingly and weirdly light. I'd never been sure if she'd told them, and now I knew for certain she hadn't. Fuck. I wanted nothing more than to bolt back to that little spare room. Fuck the pizza. What happened? But Louise was shaking her head, her face murderous. I already told you. Arjun sighed, exasperated. You told us that something happened after the picnic when Jack and Aimee broke up, which ruined the entire day, might I add. He paused and glanced over at Jack. Sorry, but it's true. Jack just shrugged. But you refused to talk about it then, and you're refusing to talk about it now. You're also refusing to help me now? Arjun sounded dangerously exasperated. Milo, who was still strapped to his chest, bounced around with each furious gesture. Do you see why I'm upset? There's something fucked up going on in our town. You have a direct connection to it, and you're refusing to help me. Louise was shaking her head fiercely, but Arjun continued on. Yes, you do! Whatever happened to Daphne is connected to Paula and to everything else. Okay, all right. Jack stepped in between Arjun and Louise. Look, Louise, he said gently after pausing for a moment. I get it. With Daphne disappearing and your dad pushing you hard, He tried to hold her hand, but Louise pulled away sharply, as if she'd been slapped. But it's okay. Not everything is your responsibility. Besides, Arjun interjected, his voice a deadly whisper. His face was flushed, heated. I know you brought the letters, Louise. He was breathing hard. Jack told me. If Arjun looked angry, Louise looked like she was ready to commit genocidal murder. But she paused, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Yes, it's true, she said finally, her voice a deadly calm. I told Jack, in confidence, that I had the letters, but she let that hang in the air for a moment. I'm not sharing them with you, she pointed at me, until she leaves. The room exploded. Everybody was yelling now, all for different reasons. Arjun was yelling at Louise, Jack was yelling at Arjun, Mikey was yelling at everyone to calm down, and Patrice just kept whispering to me that, it's okay, everything's gonna be okay. She squeezed my hands, trying to make me feel better. Patrice was one of my best friends, and the sweetest person I'd ever met. She'd been there for me after the whole thing went down with Jack, and then Louise. But I couldn't squeeze her hand back or even offer her a half-hearted smile. I couldn't do any of that because my head was starting to hurt. My blood went cold. No, I whispered, feeling my heartbeat suddenly thud. Not again. Did you say something, Aimee? Patrice asked with concern. But I ignored her. I pulled away and curled my hands into fists. Aimee, hey, it's okay, honey. Calm down. We're not going to make you leave. But I pushed her off, walking into the living room. Everybody was still yelling at each other, so nobody noticed as I sat at the end of one of the gray velvet sofas. I massaged my temples as I felt another headache threatening to take over. Not again. God, not again. It was like riding the edge of a wave I had no control over. The kaleidoscope of feelings ripped through me, and my head was spinning right along with it. I slid off the couch, pressing my back against the cool glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was snowing outside, and the cold burned through the heat in my body. It felt good. I breathed in deep, trying to settle my mind. In, out. Calm down, Aimee. I thought desperately to myself. Just calm down. Fuck. I wished desperately I'd never left my room. I just wanted to go back to bed. Tap. My right eye twitched and I closed them hard. The growing headache threatened to spill, like a barely contained fire. I curled my hands, my nails digging painfully into my palms. I could feel myself drawing blood again. The snow hit the window outside, tapping faintly. Tap, tap, tap. Fuck. My eyes flew open. Hold on. What the fuck was that? I whipped around, my eyes going wide. It was dark on the balcony outside. In the dark reflection, the only thing I could see were my wide, panicked eyes. My head pounded, but I held my breath, listening hard. A heartbeat or two passed. Nothing, except for the wind. Shrugging, I turned back around. Tap. The second I turned around, there it was again. Tap, 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 tap. My heart jolted and my body froze. No, there's no way. That didn't sound like snow. Even with wind. It was too forceful, too consistent, it can't be. My brain crawled to a stop, because if it's true, oh God. My heart stopped too. There was someone tapping on the window outside. My heart qualied. Guys, I tried to say, my heart pounding out of control. Hey guys! But my voice failed. I felt pinned to the spot. I tried again. Hey guys? Patrice, bless her heart, was the one who noticed I was trying to speak. She grabbed Louise's arm, nudging her gently, but Louise was too far gone. She was a runaway train, and Arjun had shoved her off the tracks. She pushed Patrice off roughly. Oh, I'm the problem? She cried, her face a dark red. I'm the one with control issues? Except for the fact that I kept this group together. It was me. While everyone else allowed themselves to fall apart, I didn't have that luxury. I was not allowed that. But sure, tell me how I'm the fucking problem. She was swaying in the middle of the living room, her dark skin shining with an odd, unusual glow. I could have sworn that in that moment her dark eyes looked like they were glowing too. They locked into me. Everything stopped, and I felt my heart plummet. Tell them what happened, Aimee. 3 years of guilt, layered like concrete on my soul. Fuck. The silence now felt heavy and empty, like a dead body. I opened my mouth, my jaw shaking, but nothing came out. Louise was standing at the edge of the living room, her arms crossed. Go ahead, Louise said softly. Tell them what happened. I was... The words stuck together, clogging my throat. I couldn't do it. But from the look on her face, I knew she wasn't going to let me stop. I cleared my throat. Shit. You guys know most of it. I was living at Louise's. My mom had kicked me out, but I couldn't get a spot in rehab, so I pretended to be okay. I closed my eyes, so no one would worry. You all wanted me to be clean so bad. Jack especially. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I was overwhelmed. And I was failing you. I wiped it away. The day of the picnic, I'd gotten into a fight with my mom about her not letting me come home. And instead of dealing with it, I winced. I hated reliving this. That's when Jack caught me. Well, you know the rest. But I left. I ran. And Louise followed me back to her house. And, I stuttered. And there? No, I couldn't do it. I stopped. She stole my car. Louise finished for me, the anger burning in her eyes. Still alive after all these years. High on pills, drunk off her ass, she stole my car, and while backing out of my driveway, she hit my dogs. There it was. The secret. I couldn't bear to look up. And the worst part is, she was so drunk she didn't even realize it, Louise continued softly. They were still alive after she hit them, but she just kept driving. There it was, her pound of flesh. I couldn't breathe. Her words felt like 1,000 tiny cuts, each one deeper than the last. My eyes were locked downwards as the long, stunned silence threatened to swallow me whole. It was Mikey who finally spoke. What? Yeah, holy shit. Louise, Arjun interrupted, his words catching and tumbling over themselves. But I thought that, you told us... Wait, hold on, Mickey, shut up! Louise spit bitterly. She turned back to Arjun. I told everyone that she left the door open and my dogs got out, to spare her. She pointed at me and spit the words out. But I'm done caring. She was pacing at the edge of the living room. Even though I wasn't looking up, I could practically sense the daggers she was staring at me. I'm done caring, she repeated. I'm done protecting her. I'm done! Shut the fuck up! Louise whipped around to face Mikey, who looked shocked at his own interruption. He was lurking off to the side, opposite from where Louise and Arjun were standing. Louise's face contorted as the pain and anger rippled through, but she paused as she saw the horrified expression on Mikey's face. The room grew very quiet as Monroe suddenly started to growl at the balcony doors. Mikey stammered. Yes, that's fucking terrible. Of course. He held his hands up. But before we address that, he raised one shaking finger, pointing past me towards the balcony. Does anyone else see what the fuck is standing behind Aimee? Bang! The dark balcony exploded into a cacophony of noise. Bang, 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 bang. Suddenly, the cabin was plunged into darkness. They hit the generator, Jack cried. Flashlights are in the kitchen. God, no flashlights, Arjun yelled back. It would see us inside. I could hear the balcony doors shaking as Monroe threw herself against them. She was growling viciously, growing louder by the second. Somebody was screaming. Was it me? Can someone get Monroe to stop? Arjun yelled again. She's going to break the doors. Patrice was moaning, somewhere off next to me. Somebody help me, please. We're going to die. Suddenly, I felt her run full tilt into me. We're not going to die, I whispered, pulling her into me. I reached out, feeling for another body, and grabbing what felt like a shoulder. It was Arjun. Arjun, what the fuck is... But I stopped as he grabbed my arm with a vice-like grip. Listen, he whispered, pointing upwards. Bang, 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 bang! Shh, shh. My face paled. It was coming from the skylight. It's a diversion. Arjun's hand tightened on my arm. Jack, he whispered urgently. I squinted as Jack, still wrestling a growling Monroe, stumbled over. Jack, focus, Arjun whispered again. What room doesn't have a skylight? Mine, I whipped around. Louise was standing right behind me. Mine doesn't. Jack, Louise, and Mikey quickly started barricading the door. In the pitch-black darkness, they fumbled over themselves as Jack dragged an enormous dresser against the door, and Louise started to pull over one of the twin beds. This was the old storage room where Jack's mom had kept her crafts. They'd converted it into a spare room after she'd passed, but being that the only window in here was in the door that led to the backyard, we didn't use it very often. In her haste, Louise accidentally knocked into Patrice, who fell limply to the floor. I rushed over to pick her up. Patrice grabbed my arm, digging her fingernails painfully into my skin. She pulled me in, practically shoving her lips against my ear. "We're gonna die, Aimee." She sounded choked up like she was crying. "We're gonna die." "No, we're not," I whispered back, but she was shaking her head vehemently. Her beads hit me in the face. "No, no, no, no." Her fingernails dug in. "I've seen this. I know how this ends." My body went cold at her words. I leaned back, but I could barely make out her features in the pitch blackness. "The fuck? Patrice, we'll be safe." "Safe?" Louise whirled around at the sound of my voice. "We're being fucking attacked by fucking something. We don't even know what." She turned to face the back wall, where Mikey was standing. "By the way, what the fuck did you see, Mikey?" No response. Louise's voice softened. "Mikey?" There was no response. Jack clicked a pen light on, illuminating Mikey, who was in the corner of the room. He was sitting with his back against the wall, his arms wrapped tight around his legs. His head was between his knees. "Mikey," Jack said slowly. "Mikey, what did you see?" Did it look like a person?" I whispered, my voice cracking. I watched as Mikey slowly looked up, barely able to keep his head straight. He was shaking like a leaf, but he managed to lock eyes with me. My body went cold at the sight of them. They looked black. "It looked melted," Mikey whispered. My blood went still. Fuck, that's how Paula looked too. "Melted? What do you mean?" Louise sputtered. "What person looks melted?" Mikey started rocking back and forth. "That's because that wasn't a person." Louise turned to Arjun and Jack. "We need to go. We need to get out of here." But Arjun scoffed. "And go? Where?" he said incredulously. "Everywhere is fucked up." "We can go home," Louise cried. "Jesus Christ, we can go to my dad. He'll understand." But Arjun was shaking his head. "No, he won't." Louise fell silent. The room went quiet. And so was the roof, I realized. "Arjun's right," I said grimly. "He's part of it." Louise flinched at the sound of my voice. She whimpered, softly choking back a sob. "Part of what?" Arjun carefully placed a hand on her shoulder. In the dim reflection of the alarm clock's white-blue light, the same one I had in my room, I realized that she was shaking like a leaf. "There's been weird shit happening for a very, very long time in our town." Arjun's voice shook slightly, as if the weight of the knowledge was getting too hard to bear. He paused for a moment. "I think it's time we see those letters, Louise." Time stopped as she pulled them out from the bottom of her suitcase. They were packaged in a clear white sleeve, slightly crumpled from the weight of her clothes. Here they were, I thought to myself, right in front of me. Nobody knew for sure what was growing underneath the great forests and plains that covered the world they lived in. The first recorded mention of the Great Something came in the form of a carved rock tablet. The tablet was clearly meant for some sort of ritual. The kneeling figures showed prayer to something far beyond us. But they weren't kneeling to a deity or some sort of blasphemous church. No, they were kneeling to two figures, two children, to be precise. "Oh," I said softly, as the soft blush of recognition crept over me. "I know this. It's the fairy tale that Daphne used to tell us as kids," I said softly. I looked up at Louise. She was crying, her head in her hands. "This is a fairy tale?" Jack asked incredulously as he held another letter. "Seems kind of dark." Jack, Arjun, and I were huddled on the remaining twin bed with the letters spread amongst us. Mikey still hadn't moved from the corner he'd wedged himself in, and Patrice was sitting next to him. I shook my head. "Well, no, it's more of a story." Jack's flashlight danced, flickering from one letter to the other. The bone-white letters lit up and flashed. There were 8 of them in total. A story about 2 kids growing up on either side of a river. I sighed. There were lots of stories, actually, but she liked to tell us this one. The stones create ripples, and though the stones are thrown at separate times and in different places, a few ripples will still inevitably meet. I looked over at Jack, who was completely absorbed in the letter he was holding. His hands bent gracefully around the piece of paper, as he did his best to hold it gently. A memory danced at the edge of my consciousness, but with a quick twist of my head, I chased it away. I cleared my throat. "And where those particular ripples meet, the energy grows so great it can swallow entire ships whole." I sighed again. Something like that, at least. Uh-huh, Arjun said. I noticed he wasn't touching the letters. Louise, where did you find these? Louise choked a sob. The first one arrived in 2007, the year after she disappeared. Then the next one in 2008, then in 2010. She picked up a letter. She pointed to something at the very top. There's dates. I'm guessing it's when she dropped them off. Dropped them off where? Arjun asked, cautiously. He was refusing to let them near his body. His blue robe pulled tightly around his body, with Milo now in his lap and his cast propped up on the nearby nightstand. Louise looked up at him, her eyes taking on an angry sheen. If you must know, she said slowly. They were shoved into the wooden frame of my childhood bedroom window. Jack looked up, confused. But wasn't your bedroom on the third floor? Yes, it was. Arjun blanched. Louise, but that's crazy. She immediately guffawed, startling Monroe from her sleep. Crazy? Imagine how I felt. Just imagine it for 1 second. I couldn't handle it. She looked down at the letters, her eyes going sad again. I felt crazy. She traced the edges of a letter. The first 4 letters were wedged in there so tightly that I didn't find them until the day after my 15th birthday, she said, sighing. Which is, of course, when I woke up to 2 letters nailed to the outside frame of my window. Nailed to the outside of your window. The story, the handwriting, I said, close to tears as I interrupted Arjun. Louise, my God, who else could it be? It's her. Louise's eyes leveled with mine as we saw each other fully for the first time in years. I know, she finally said quietly. That's what I've been saying. It was around 3:00 a.m. by the time everyone finally passed out. Arjun was the last to fall asleep as he kept insisting he wanted to stand watch with me, but I could tell he was losing the battle against the pain meds he'd taken. Finally, I watched him nod off from pure exhaustion. Finally, just me and you, girl, I whispered to Monroe. She wagged her tail gently. The roof was quiet now. Occasionally, I'd hear the odd bang or scratch, but at least Monroe wasn't growling anymore. Still, I wasn't planning on leaving the room till morning. Until then, it was just me, Monroe, the howling wind, and the letters, and this headache. It twinged again, causing me to rub my temples furiously. It probably didn't help that I'd been staring at these letters for hours. I spread them out, feeling them hum underneath my hands. It was interesting how ordinary they looked. They looked like pages torn from a small lined notebook. Even the content was ordinary. I'd pored over the letters, reading and rereading them, desperately hoping to find even the smallest of clues of where Daphne could possibly be. But the only thing inscribed was that weird, grim knockoff fairy tale. Nobody knew for sure what was growing underneath the great forests and plains that covered the world they lived in. The first recorded mention of the Great Something came in the form of a carved rock tablet. I frowned. I kept seeing this pattern over and over. There isn't a code, Louise had kept insisting while she was still awake. I would have found it by now. I didn't doubt her on that one. The type A genes ran strong in the Tiths family, but then again, there it was again. They grew up on either side of the river of Gihon, one growing up before the other as time seemed to move slowly as it crossed from one bank to the other. It seemed so random, like it didn't follow any code I'd seen before. Like any kid growing up in the late 90s and early 20s, I wanted to be Nancy Drew. I'd spent my hard-earned money on a bike, so I could sneak off to the library to read her books. After Paula disappeared and I was dealing with the fallout, I used to spend entire weeks hiding out in the mystery section. I placed the first 2 letters side by side. More bolded letters. The letters seemed to concentrate in spots and then fan outwards. I moved closer. With my nose mere inches from the paper at this point, I stared at the offending marks. What do you want, Daphne? I angrily huffed. What does this mean? The thing was, even though this didn't feel like a code, I knew I'd seen this goddamn somewhere. A bolt of pain shot through my brain. I winced. Why couldn't you have made this goddamn easier? I placed the 3rd letter next to the first 2. More bolded letters, fanning out. I paused. My heart started to beat a little faster. No way. I grabbed all the letters, crumpling them a little in my haste. Lining them up, they stretched from practically one side of the room to the other. The bolded letters seemed to glow, like the black ink was absorbing the pale white-blue light. I crouched over them. Then I saw it. "Oh my God," I said loudly, not caring who I woke up. "It's circles. Like goddamn ripples in water." I could feel myself tearing up. "Or rings in a tree trunk, or..." I paused. It suddenly hit me. I knew it. "No way!" I said. "Oh my fucking God!" I said again, this time louder. "This is a fucking map!" But not just any map. My hands flew to the pockets of Arjun's blue robe where, after patting him down, I quickly pulled out his silver iPhone 11. Arjun could always be counted on to be within arm's reach of his phone at all times, even when being attacked by terrifying creatures from the woods. Shaking, I typed in his code. "Aimee," Arjun said groggily. "What are you doing?" I'd knocked him a little too hard in my pursuit. He sat up on the bed, shaking his head. "Aim, is that my phone?" But I wasn't paying attention to him. Suddenly, my heart stopped. "Oh my God," I breathed. I knew it. "What are you looking at?" He huffed, sounded annoyed. "Show me." Shaking, I turned the phone around and reached up to show him. The screen brightened his face with a pale white light. "Look," I breathed. "That's what's hidden in these letters." I tapped the screen. "It's a fucking topographical map of Yosemite Valley." He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "Are you sure?" "Pretty damn sure," I started to say, when suddenly Arjun lunged forward, grabbing my arm. It hurt. "Okay, Arjun, what the fuck?" I tried to stand up, but Arjun suddenly yanked me back down. "Shh, Aimee," he said urgently. His eyes were wide and terrified. "Stop talking!" My heart seized in terror. "What is it? What do you..." "Aimee," Arjun said slowly, cutting me off. "What in the fuck is going on with your necklace?" My heart stopped. I looked down. The silver locket, something I'd had since birth, was floating. "Arjun," I said slowly. "What the fuck is going on?" Suddenly, a bolt of white lightning shot through my brain. I clutched my temples, kneeling over in pain. It felt like my brain was being torn apart from the inside out. The headache, which had been quietly throbbing the entire night, suddenly boiled over and flooded my entire body. "No, no, no, no!" I moaned, my chest burning. My skin felt like it was on fire. I grabbed the nearby nightstand, trying to pull myself to my feet. I felt like a drunk, stumbling home after a bender. Arjun reached out, desperately trying to steady me. Suddenly, I felt the back of my neck burst open. The locket, freed from the prison of my neck, shot forward, and suddenly, like how Moses parted the Red Sea, the pain seeping from every pore in my brain was suddenly gone, as if something had pushed it aside. Gasping for air, I pulled myself up from where I'd fallen. With my eyes cleared, I looked up to see Arjun was crouched over the letters. Arjun gestured to them. "Tell me, Aimee, where did it hit?" I shuffled over, my legs threatening to give out at any second. I bent down. The letters were still smoking from where the locket had hit. Shaking, I pulled out Arjun's phone. I paused for a moment, my fingers shaking as I scrolled. "Sentinel Dome," I said, my voice cracking. "Right next to Glacier Point, right where..." But I paused, as the feeling of tears became overwhelming. Arjun looked at me. "Right next to... where?" he said urgently. It's where Paula went missing." Despair washed over me. It felt like I was sinking. It seized my throat, rendering me almost incapable of speech. But still, something stirred inside me, just enough to loosen the manacles I'd placed upon myself. "I guess," I finally whispered. "I guess that's where we're going next."